Okay, welcome to the info briefing, joint Senate and House info briefing on invasive species. I'll introduce the Senate first. I am Mike Gabbard. I chair the Agriculture Environment Committee. And then we have with us Senator Lorraine Inouye, chairs the Water Land Committee, and Brandon Elefante is the vice chair. Also Senator Joy Buenaventura is the chair of the Health and Human Services. And also my vice chair of AEN is Senator Tim Richards.
Thanks, and aloha everyone. For the House, myself, I'm chair of the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. I'm here with my co-chairs, Chair Gates, chair of the Agriculture and Food Systems Committee, and Chair Ichiyama, chair of the Water Land Committee, and then Vice Chair Poi Poi for Water and Land, Vice Chair Cochran for Energy and Environmental Protection, and Vice Chair Kahaloa for Agriculture Committee. And Representative Martin is here watching, Chair of Human Services.
Also, I'd like to add Senator Carl Rhodes, who's also on the AEN Committee, chairs JDC. Okay, so aloha mai kako, and first of all, I'd like to mahalo Chelsea Arnott, the HISC coordinator, for helping the presenters get all set up. Also mahalo to the House for their hospitality, their conference room, and their tech support. To the 5 other committees and members, and to all of you in the audience for showing up and participating in this briefing. A recent study published by the UN estimated that the economic cost associated with invasive species adds up to $423 billion every year. So in island ecosystems, invasive species are the main driver of diversity loss and second leading driver of habitat destruction. Also, invasive species increase the frequency and intensity of wildfires. So they can exacerbate the impacts of climate change, as we've seen with the rising mosquito population that threatens the remaining native Hawaiian forest bird populations. So that's why we've brought in local experts to explain the scope and magnitude of the problem, as well as what the various departments are doing about it. So let's begin. We will start off with Chelsea Arnott from the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. Chelsea is the invasive species coordinator with DLNR and program support for HISC. Welcome, Chelsea.
Mahalo. My favorite time of year. And I love kicking off the session with having these briefings, and especially the invasive species informational briefing. Let me just get my slides together here real quick. Great. Aloha chairs, vice chairs, committee members. Again, my name is Chelsea Arnott, and I'm the invasive species coordinator with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and also program support for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. I just want to take a minute to thank and recognize our chairs for providing the time and space to have this important discussion and bringing all these committees together here today. This is a wonderful turnout, and my heart is definitely pounding a little bit right now, but very excited to be here. And of course, the staff of the chair's office that have really helped coordinate and organize this informational briefing. Each year we have this invasive species informational briefing. We almost always go over time. And that's because this is an issue that impacts everyone in this room and outside this room. And there's not only a lot to report out on, but there's a lot to discuss here. This slide shows the data collected in 2023 from our online reporting system, 643pest.org, which is a critical tool for early detection and rapid response efforts. In my 15 years of working on invasive species issues in Hawaii, I have not seen the level of community concern and advocacy regarding invasive species as I have over the last year with the spread of coconut rhinoceros beetle, little fire ant, and coqui frogs. Our online pest public reporting facilitator saw reports double in 2023, and this is due largely to the spread of coconut rhinoceros beetle. She has also seen an increase in reports for coqui frogs, and we are facing naturalized populations that are proving difficult to address with our conventional treatments. The windward community on Oahu has raised alarm about little fire ant infestations increasing in their communities, and we have seen legislators, community members, and council members step up to address these concerns by canvassing their own neighborhoods for permissions and to survey and treat and pushing important rule changes forward that will address the movement of pests between islands from high-risk pathways. The goal of this informational briefing is not only to inform you about the challenges and obstacles we face, but also to highlight where we have made progress and our collective accomplishments. I'm happy to have representatives from each of the departments working on invasive species and biosecurity here today, as well as partner projects and community members, which are critical voices to share updates and perspectives from their divisions and programs. Each presentation will be about 8 minutes. We'll try to enforce that so we make sure everybody has their allotted time. And I'm happy to leave space after each presentation for questions from the committee members with the chair's approval. I was able to watch the Money Committee briefings with Department of Agriculture and Department of Land and Natural Resources. There were 2 pressing concerns that I felt were highlighted in those discussions with regard to invasive species and biosecurity. The first was, where are the plans? And the second is, who's doing what? I want to provide an overview and hopefully address those 2 topics, but definitely our department presentations will help highlight some of those. I want to start by saying, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. I want to start by saying we have a plan to address exactly this. It is my mouse pad right now, but it's the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. This plan was launched in 2017, and it recognized to make progress on biosecurity and protect Hawaii from invasive species statewide, coordination was needed. The plan identifies 147 action items and department leads for each of those actions, which are represented here today. The plan is comprehensive in scope. It looks at every aspect of biosecurity. It's collaborative, multidisciplinary, and implementation is across 10 years, and we're moving into our 7th year of implementation of this plan. In 2017, these were some of the thematic challenges that this plan aimed to address. And unfortunately, many of these issues still exist as we move into 2024. They can be linked to a lack of resources, that we need to increase capacity, support on-the-ground operations, and build critical facilities. And there's also challenges to creating policies and updating policies that will help us better prevent and manage invasive species. And as we zoom out and we look at our progress since 2017 when the plan launched, you can see that much of the progress was made in those early years of the plan. And this is due to a number of reasons. There's a lot of the actions in the beginning were low-hanging actions, and that many of those actions are ongoing, so their status remains the same year after year. But there are a lot of actions that no progress has been made in several years or has not started. So to refamiliarize and re-energize action on the plan, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council requested an internal review of actions that are stuck or not started to create a path forward at the June 2023 meeting. HISC program support is currently conducting a thorough review with department leads and will present a formal update at the next HISC meeting. Despite the challenges, significant progress has been made, and I wanted to highlight a few key actions. First is enhancing public awareness and community engagement. This has gone well beyond the table at a local event, although these are still really important. Communities are controlling weeds and pests in their neighborhood. There's an interactive biosecurity display at the new Hawaiian terminal at the Honolulu International Airport, and neighborhood boards are making invasive species part of their agendas. Despite ongoing need for more funding, the HISC budget has gradually increased over the last 6 years. The state has provided funding for little fire ant and coconut rhinoceros beetle response, and there are more federal funding opportunities that specifically address invasive species and climate resiliency. These funds are critical to monitoring at our ports of entry, supporting the on-the-ground work, and continuing to support research projects. Hawaii is leading the way with developing new landscape-level tools to address widespread invasive species. This includes the aerial treatment of little fire ant in Nihiku, Maui, propagation of native urchins to control invasive algae, the use of mosquito birth control to save our forest birds, and research of natural enemies to control weeds like Miconia and Albizia trees. And to have this kind of success, it does cost money, but the investment is worth it compared to something like brown tree snake establishing in Hawaii or ongoing management of little fire ant across the state. If we break down the cost of implementation of all these actions in the plan across 10 years, it equates to around $38 million per year, or in 2024 dollars, that's around $47.5 million per year. Even with the 2024 cost, this is just a drop in the bucket compared to something like brown tree snake or having the impacts of these pests come to our island. And I want to make sure to mention the nexus of climate change and invasive species. Invasive species are known to exacerbate the effects of climate change, and in island ecosystems, we are sometimes in the front row of seeing this interaction. To be climate resilient, we do need to invest in invasive species prevention and management. And to talk about roles and responsibilities, I'm just going to highlight our gap-filling projects here. And the Biosecurity Plan recognizes that no one agency can do it alone. It is important to recognize the critical role of these gap-filling programs play in biosecurity. For our state departments, we are restricted to where we can work and what we can work on by regulatory authorities and jurisdictions. We are also constrained by resources and capacity. The partner projects like the Island Invasive Species Committee, Hawaii Ant Lab, Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle Response Team, and the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species are able to fill some of those gaps between departments. For instance, they work to survey and control pests in neighborhood and other private property where DLNR and H2A don't typically work. Because they work with communities on their islands, they are sometimes the best boots on the ground for rapid response and getting the word out about new pests. Maui Invasive Species Committee immediately sprung into action with the detection of coconut rhinoceros beetle, surveying over hundreds of palms over just a few days and creating an image library to identify suspect trees. And you'll be hearing from each of these departments and our partner agencies during this briefing. And with that, I'd either like to invite questions or we can move into the first presentations by the departments. Mahalo.
No questions after each. Yeah. Any questions, Senator? Okay.
Great. We can move into the first presentations, which are going to be from the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. And I'll have each presenter introduce themselves while I get set up here.
Good afternoon, chairs, vice chairs, members of the many various committees assembled here today. Mahalo for your time. My name is Ryan Kanakaole. I'm the First Deputy for the Department of Land and Natural Resources. And I wanted to thank you for your time because this is a critical issue that we're discussing here, the status of invasive species and the various strategies in preventing the proliferation of them. Mahalo nui to Chelsea for her presentation on the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan and the Hawaii Invasive Species Council's work. Tackling the proliferation of invasive species is an extremely complex challenge. Its impacts are widespread across the various specialties, the various industries, and quite frankly, it impacts all of us. And I'm glad she highlighted the value of collaboration between the partner agencies to implement the biosecurity plan. Regarding DLNR's update today, before the committees, I would like to introduce Rob Hoff from our Division of Forestry and Wildlife. DOFA's presentation will focus on updates regarding axis deer, rapid ohia death, and invasive grasses in the context of wildfire management. Also with us is Elizabeth Monahan from the Division of Aquatic Resources. Her presentation will focus on the DAR's strategies towards battling invasive species, focusing on DAR's response to coral disease, invasive corals, and invasive algae. I hope you find our presentations enlightening, and we're here to answer any questions that you have. Mahalo nui. And with that, we'll start with DOFA's presentation.
Thanks, Ryan. So, as Ryan said, I have updates on a little bit closer, Shaka. My shock is bigger than yours, maybe. I have updates on 3 important invasive species priorities of the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. First up is axis deer on Maui. So axis deer were introduced to Maui in 1959 when 9 deer were released in the upcountry area. From those 9 deer, the population has grown to at least 46,000 based on the survey shown here from 2021. And since that survey didn't cover the entire island, we estimate that the number is as high as 60,000. So the population level is widely recognized as being too high, and the governor has issued an emergency proclamation directing all state and county agencies to work together to address the problem. A population this large impacts watersheds, native ecosystems, farms and ranches, residences, and public safety, where they cause vehicular collisions. They can also severely impact vegetation and upland habitats, causing major erosion problems that impact marine ecosystems and fisheries. The deer population is currently estimated to be 60,000, as I said earlier, and is estimated to be increasing at a rate of 20% per year. That means we need to harvest at least 20% of 60,000 just to keep the population level. Since our goal is to reduce the population, our target over the next 10 years is to harvest 30% or 18,000 deer. And in this graph, you can see in the red where we would be if we did nothing, yellow with that 20% harvest rate holding steady, and finally where we want to be in the green, where we're able to take out 30% a year. So we can do that by working with agencies, landowners, and hunters using existing tools such as public hunting, wildlife control permits, commercial and food donation of venison harvest, fences, traps, staff, and assistance and incentives to private landowners to help them increase their harvest rates. It's also critical that we do this sustainably, and we can do this by integrating population management approach with spatial planning, containment using a network of fences, annual monitoring to adjust targets and methods, and landowner assistance. So this is a work in progress, and the progress I think is good. We have good news. Harvest levels are steadily increasing, as you can see in this chart, and are expected to hit targets this year. We've hired 3 full-time axis deer coordinators who are working with your constituents. We have a draft action plan for Maui that we will submit to the task force this month. We're in the process of completing an updated Maui Island survey now, and we'll also be doing a Molokai survey this year. There are many miles of new fences and upcountry area on private lands, and we recently established a new hunting area in upcountry through an agreement with DHHL. So moving on to rapid ohia death. DLNR continues to survey the state's ohia forests with its partners 2 times per year. The distribution hasn't changed significantly from last year, but more leuco-ohia, Ceratocystis leuco-ohia, which is shown here in red, that's the aggressive form of the disease, can be seen on both Kauai and Hawaii Island. Fortunately, on Kauai, we haven't seen extensive dieback in the core ohia forest on that island, which is encouraging, and managers there continue to aggressively respond, especially in that core ohia area. On Hawaii Island, we continue to see this pattern of high disease occurrence in areas where feral animal populations, especially pigs and cattle, are not controlled. The animals wound trees, allowing them to be infected, and may be moving the disease around as well. So we're using some of the funds that have been budgeted by the legislature to prioritize animal management in areas where fences have already been built. And finally, this year we'll be hosting a science symposium to collect all the information from the past 10 years of research and identify gaps in our knowledge, as well as revisit management recommendations. This will all be synthesized in an update to our multi-agency strategic response plan that was last updated in 2020, and we intend to complete that by the next legislative session. The plan will describe long-term management needs and identify any budget gaps. We're also scaling up screening of ohia populations for disease resistance in order to provide rod-resistant ohia for restoration statewide. Finally, I wanted to talk briefly about fire, as it is a hot issue right now. We are focusing on improving management of invasive grasses, which continue to replace forest ecosystems in Hawaii. Although these problematic species cannot be eradicated, they can be managed in some places to reduce fire risk. DLNR is requesting an increase in its firefighting budget, which would allow us to increase our management of invasive grasses. We're proposing to increase strategic fuels management through chemical and mechanical control, targeted grazing by livestock, and shaded fuel breaks where invasive grasses are shaded out by native and cultural tree species, thereby breaking up contiguous flash fuels. And finally, developing capacity for post-fire treatments by increasing native seed banking and developing tools such as native hydromulching. Our goal is to restore burn areas to resilient forest landscapes that will better withstand the threat of fire and provide watershed function. And thank you, and we are open for questions, if there are any.
Any questions? Senator Favela?
As you bringing up the fire situation, are you guys using anything else to mediate fires besides water?
For fire response.
Yeah, I understand that, but you're just talking about how we're going to try to prevent the fires or the fire response, but are we using anything else to prevent the fires to occur besides water?
Besides water, yes. So some of that is getting into that fuels management piece that I mentioned, where we go in before fires occur and we install fuel breaks. We might be planting green breaks to shade out the trees so that that breaks up the fuels and allows us more time when there is a fire and do have to respond. It can give us a line of defense. So there's a focus on that so that we're better prepared for fires in the future in these high-risk areas.
Are you guys knowing of the product, AR1 fire retardant spray?
I believe that's what they use in aerial operations on the mainland, and we do not use that here in Hawaii.
Why is that?
I think that there are some environmental concerns regarding it, and our aerial operations are usually not...
Odorless, colorless, non-toxic for the environment, and it's safe. So I don't know which one you're talking about. The one that I did research on is not...
Okay, I might be talking about a different one. I know there have been concerns on the mainland.
To the environment.
Okay.
So I just wanted to know, because going forward, I'm very concerned, because in my community, same as Miley Senator Sherwood-Kerr's community, we have every year very dry areas, especially by Verona Village, where we have people in the 80s to 90s. So if we're going to be talking about this, I wanted to make sure that we look into all aspects of preventing anything like we have in Lahaina, because water and planting grass and other products is great, but what else are we doing? Are we going over and beyond what we need to get done for the preventing something like this? Yeah, being preventive, not action. So I just wanted to know if you guys heard of the product. If not, I'd be happy to share it with you guys and the rest of the committee.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Senator Inouye?
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Great presentation for us at the outset. So my question is with regards to the fuel management and the fire response area. So with our large island structure where we have independent islands separated by water, are there any partnerships you're working with regards to the response? Is it just DOFAR personnel with regards to, I guess, your new budget request this year? Or are you partnering with the counties, with their fire departments and other areas, I guess?
Yep. So we partner closely with the counties as well as federal agencies, DOD, as well as DOI agencies. And we have developed, in cooperation with our partners, response maps. So we have primary response duties on division-managed land. So that's almost 1 million acres in Mauka areas that we are the lead when there's a fire. And then there's another, we call it the pink area on those maps. And those are areas where the counties are the lead, but they're in forest areas, frequently on private land. And so we will support the counties when they call us, and they can just call our firefighters directly on the ground, and we will be there to play whatever role they need us. So when it's outside that area and the county needs help, they have to go through HIEMA, and HIEMA sends the request to us. And in all cases where I've worked for the division, we've always approved those and backed up HIEMA. We have mutual aid agreements with these federal agencies that allow us to support them and for them to support us when we need extra resources on a fire.
Okay, so with the increase in the budget request, or the budget request for this year, so does that include just addressing our state workers like DOFAR?
That's correct.
Okay.
The budget request is purely for our division responses.
I won't belabor the questions, but I just want to add your partnership with PTA on Big Island as well, because they've been good partners with regards to the entire DKI highway area and Waikoloa on the Big Island. But you invited them to become part of the partnerships as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
One other question. My understanding is that there were 4 axis deer that were illegally transported to the Big Island from Maui in 2009. What's the population of those axis deer on the Big Island now?
So we believe that it has been controlled and eradicated. There have been no confirmed reports of axis deer. There are some rumors that they might still be there, but we don't have any confirmation that there's an existing population. So we're pretty confident that we've eradicated it, but they can be difficult to detect species. So we are on the alert still.
Okay, thank you. Good. Chair?
Thanks. I'll ask my question first because it's also about axis deer, and then I think Rep. Bichiyama and then Rep. Gates have questions as well. Have you ever done any kind of cost-benefit analysis? I mean, you mentioned 3 full-time positions dealing with axis deer on Maui, plus the cost of, incredibly expensive fencing that requires, initial construction costs, plus maintenance, plus the impact that axis deer continue to have on the environment. And I know that the idea of completely eradicating them comes with some controversy, but I think it would be helpful to have the numbers to be able to make proper decision-making, both for us as legislators and the public, to understand what is the cost of, maintaining this invasive population of axis deer when eradication could be, an alternative that might cost less.
Right.
It would just be good to know.
No, absolutely. And I think as we progress, now that we're receiving, resources for controlling, that will be data that could be used in such a cost-benefit analysis, looking at, what you get when you put that amount. So I think collaborating with maybe UH, one of their programs, to do such an analysis would be really helpful. But I'm not aware of anything that's been done at this point, and there probably isn't extensive data to base it on. So hopefully that's something we can do moving forward.
What would you, do you have any further comment on that besides there's no data?
I think the impacts are extensive of the deer. So if you're looking at the costs that are currently, a lot of those are, some of them would be monetary, like impacts on farmers' crops. A lot of them that are environmental are a little bit trickier to get at, but the economists do have methods of doing that. And I think that there hasn't been an island-wide strategic attempt. So I think that, what we're doing right now is adaptive management.
Even if you can't value the environment, even if it's harder to attach a valuation to environmental impacts, you still know the amount the state is currently spending.
Correct.
And will continue to spend in perpetuity if we continue to have populations of axis deer versus some amount of, some sum upfront that would go towards eradication. You already mentioned 3 full-time positions, right, plus all the fencing projects.
No, I think that's something that we should look at.
Okay, thanks, Chair Ichiyama.
Thank you, Chair Lowen. This question may also be for Administrator Dave Smith. I understand that a few years ago we passed a bill to expand DOFA's adaptive rulemaking, adaptive management, I think, like you were just mentioning. And then partly that was a tool for you folks to respond to invasive species. So there's a bill this session to expand that and give you more flexibility. Can you speak to how that would give you more tools in this area?
Sure, thank you for that. David Smith, Administrator, Division of Forestry and Wildlife. So we have used that adaptive management statute to change some hunting on Kauai, where goats were expanding to the point where hunters were concerned they were going to have detrimental impacts on the habitat. And so we've started that program. It's been about a year now. It's been really well received. So we're looking at making that permanent. But the way the statute's written now is somewhat limiting, and so having more flexibility, and that would be good in terms of providing more adaptive management capability to the division.
Great, thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. I guess I will start off with the fire response. As you guys know, I represent the Waianae Coast very dry community. In regards to our watersheds, which also contribute to unhealthy forests in our communities and creating these opportunities for wildfires to spread even more rapidly throughout the community. Is there, in the past there has been aerial shooting, for example, of ungulates in the community, deer, not deer, but goats and pigs and so forth. Is there a way that you see as the Department of, or Division of Forestry, to be able to bring the community in on it? And whether that's through a bounty program that we can start enacting, or any other ways to really have the community help with these issues, as it's a community issue.
Yeah, David Smith again. So we do rely, our public hunting program is our #1 line of defense against, ungulates becoming out of control. A lot of these animals are kind of a two-edged sword. They're valued as a hunting animal and a source of food for some people, and then they also can be extremely damaging invasive species on the other hand. And so by applying hunting pressure, you can keep the animals under control. What we've done on Oahu for the most part is opened up most of our areas to year-round daily hunting. So we've removed a lot of the restrictions like weekends and state holidays and seasonal things. And so we're trying to move toward a year-round daily. So we've done that on most of the areas, all the areas on Oahu that there can be. Some of them have other restraints where we can't have it daily hunting, whether it be leases or something else. But anyway, that's our first line of defense. In a lot of cases, that's not enough, and then we have to take the next step. A lot of that's working with hunting clubs. We work with the Oahu Pig Hunters Association and other hunting clubs and interested hunting individuals to bring more pressure. So there are ways to bring more pressure using public hunting, and that is our preferred method. If that isn't enough, then we have to move into more aggressive control programs like fencing and staff hunting and that kind of thing.
Got it. And I know the fencing can be quite expensive too, in terms of getting
Fencing is
that.
very expensive.
In terms of tools that you have in your toolbox, where does that land in terms of fencing compared to public hunting?
Well, like I say, public hunting will take it to a certain point. It depends on what your goals are, what the habitat is. It might be an area that is a lot of introduced or invasive plant species, and you're not as concerned, as long as it doesn't eat it down to dirt and you have runoff issues. In other areas where we're trying to protect native habitat, native species, sometimes endangered and threatened endangered species, then we have a lower threshold for what we can accept in terms of damage by animals, and then we'll move into more aggressive things like fencing and whatnot. But we usually reserve that type of thing for our higher priority native forest and native habitat areas.
Couple quick questions. For the equipment that you guys currently have, is it a priority for you folks to get additional, like firehawks, for example, to help combat large fires across the state?
Firehawks?
Yeah, like
Aircraft, you mean?
yeah, aircraft, helicopters.
Right now we use contract aircraft. There are states, it varies by state, so we are part of the National Association of State Foresters, and we collaborate with, they have fire management committees, and it varies across all the states. So some states have their own fire aviation programs and some do not. We currently do not. It would be quite an undertaking to stand up an aerial firefighting capability within our division. Right now it doesn't seem to be the limiting factor, not being able to get enough aircraft, and we have a lot of really good local contractors that we work with. So it is not the first line right now. We're going for additional recurring funds, some additional personnel and equipment, more ground-based equipment, and not get into aerial assets to manage ourselves.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll move on to our next presenter, please. Chelsea?
Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, quick question.
Okay, one quick question.
Yeah. Just wanted to verify concerning when you're talking about replanting firescapes, did you say you're using forestry to replant all firescapes, or just specifically you're using the forestry in forested areas?
So to reforest
I think you have to speak in the mic. Thanks.
So that would be primarily for going in after a fire has burnt through a forest we manage.
Okay.
And instead of allowing the invasive grasses to just take over, so you perpetuate that cycle, going in and planting with native trees to make sure that the grasses don't dominate and you don't lose that watershed.
And then in open spaces, you would plant with something else. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the environment.
Okay.
The
As
rainfall
long as
is key. Having available water, I think, is the clincher.
So just based upon the environment. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Chair.
Chelsea?
Mahalo, Chair. So our next presenter is also DLNR with the Division of Aquatic Resources, Lizzie Monaghan. She's the Ballast Water and Biofouling Coordinator.
Hi. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk today a little bit about DAR's Aquatic Invasive Species Program, some issues we've been facing, and some things that we've been doing to address those issues. So a little, thank you. A little idea about what our aquatic invasive species team does. We take kind of a three-tiered approach to addressing aquatic invasive species issues. We use prevention, we use early detection and rapid response, so identifying invasions and rapidly removing them to prevent them from becoming established, and then also management and control of already established populations. And that's kind of like a more long-term approach. There's two top vectors or ways that aquatic invasive species travel to the Hawaiian Islands. The first and most prevalent is vessel traffic, and this includes ballast water and hull fouling, which are two issues I'll get into a little more in a second. And then also release through the aquarium and aquaculture trade, and this can be both intentional or unintentional. So just a little background on ballast water and hull fouling, those top two vectors of aquatic invasive species introduction. Ballast water is the water that a vessel takes up or releases as it's balancing its weight. So when a vessel is in a harbor, it might take up water, and with that water, it might also take up the organisms that are in the water column, and then it might travel to another harbor and release that water and release the organisms with it. So this is an issue that we face with a lot of commercial and military vessels. And then another issue that all vessels have is hull fouling. So that's that community of organisms that's growing on the bottom of a vessel. And this can be anything from bacteria, which you can't even see, all the way to, I've even seen an entire lobster living in a hull fouling community before. So one very significant piece of federal legislation that impacts our aquatic invasive species team is the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act of 2018. So this act, or this bill, is still in its final rulemaking process within the EPA. We're expecting the final rules to come out in the fall of 2024, and then the Coast Guard will have 2 years to decide on the guidelines for enforcing the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act. And this is very significant for us because it preempts states from developing or enforcing ballast water and vessel hull fouling regulations that are more stringent than federal regulations under VITA. However, this gives us the opportunity to enforce or co-enforce the new federal regulations or enforce state regulations that mirror federal regulations, so we can still have a hand in the prevention of aquatic invasive species via ballast water or hull fouling. However, it also prohibits states from charging shipping companies a fee to support this co-enforcement or enforcement, which means there's not revenue through that avenue to build a enforcement team within DAR. And one reason this kind of legislation is so important, so a major issue that we've been addressing on our prevention side of our team is stony coral tissue loss disease. This is a coral disease that's been devastating the Caribbean. It's rapidly spread throughout much of the Caribbean, and it causes a really high rate of mortality within corals. It affects over 20 species, and depending on the species, it can have up to 90% mortality rate. This is very concerning for Hawaii because this, while we don't know what the pathogen is, we do know that it can travel via vessel traffic, either in ballast water or in biofouling communities, which means it's a high risk of spread to Hawaii because vessels traveling from this area can bring the disease to our reefs. So what we need is robust legislation to prevent vessels from discharging ballast water that contains this disease over Hawaiian reefs. We're pursuing emergency rulemaking, the emergency rulemaking process to add additional regulations to vessels traveling from these infected areas. And then also once VITA passes, we will be able to petition for emergency orders to target these vessels. Another aquatic invasive species issue we're facing here in Hawaii is invasive octocorals in Pearl Harbor. So 2 species of octocorals, which are soft corals called Eunomia and Capnella, were introduced to the Pearl Harbor watershed, likely by an aquarium release. And since their introduction, they've spread to 82 acres of seafloor, covering native corals and potentially smothering them and having huge impacts on our ecosystem. One of the species, Eunomia, is also highly invasive in Venezuela, where they have not been able to get a handle on the invasion, and it's colonized over 60 miles of reef and devastated their coral reefs. So while these species are present in federal waters in the Pearl Harbor watershed, we're not sure yet if the invasion has spread to state waters. So we need to rapidly conduct statewide diver and eDNA surveys to look for signs of octocoral spread outside of Pearl Harbor. And then if we do find signs of invasion in state waters, to respond to it and remove it before it becomes an issue and before our reefs become like Venezuela's. And then finally, I just wanted to provide an update on a long-term biocontrol project within our team of invasive algae in Kaneohe Bay and Waikiki. So we have a long-term project using the native Hawaiian collector urchin grown in an urchin hatchery to control invasive algae on the reef because they're very effective grazers. So last year in 2023, over 70,000 square meters of reef were treated, and we also hit a major milestone. Our teams outplanted the 1 millionth urchin to the reefs. So with that, I would love to take any questions, and I also have contact information for myself and the other aquatic invasive species biologist up there.
Senator Noy?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. A question with regards to your slide on the stony coral tissue loss disease.
Yes.
Question is, understanding that you refer to an emergency rules, who's going to develop those emergency rules, or is it pending discussions?
The emergency rules, we're currently in the language creating process, so we've been working with our legal fellow on developing the language.
Okay, then the question would be, did I hear you say that part of the rules that you're going to prevent vessels from entering Hawaii?
Oh, no, certainly not.
Okay.
No, yeah, it would just add additional regulations to ballast water discharges, only
okay.
applying to vessels traveling from that area.
Oh, okay, so And the, that would be with the restrictions within our Hawaii waters?
Yeah.
Because beyond the 30 miles, then we have no jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And that's now with regards to going back to the question on the rules then, is it finalized or will it be out there in the public once it's done for review?
So it's not finalized yet,
Okay.
but we're expecting it to be finalized soon, and then it will be up for review.
Okay, that'll be interesting too, because, you know, we use a lot of marine transportation in the state, so I think it'll be controversial, but just to ask that, make sure that it's put out there for discussions as well. Yeah. Thanks, we see boss there.
Yeah. Aloha, Senator Brian Nielsen, Administrator for Division of Aquatic Resources. Yes, totally hear you. So any sort of rulemaking would go through the Chapter 91 rulemaking process that has opportunities for public input. And we also work really closely with the industry to make sure that they're aware of anything that we would propose to the rulemaking process.
I'm sure Hugs would be ready to participate in your discussions.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Favela and then Senator Elefante.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys know of Nelha, company Ocean Arrow is producing, they want to make a fish farm cage in Neva Beach, in my community, as part of the project to plan and to restore the Limu. Have you guys heard of Ocean Arrow?
I've heard of Ocean Era, but no proposals or EISs or anything like that has come across our desk. And I believe it would go through our OCCL division as well, and I haven't heard from them that they've seen anything from them yet either.
Okay, guys, just want to make sure that we are ahead of the game because they're trying to put in 24 cages, 2 times to 3 times more than the Moai cages that was out there. And our community is very concerned because, you know, that's a lot of environmental kind issues that we don't know about in the area. And one more question, since you guys are talking about preserving our coral and our water. Where are we at in outside of Iroquois Point and in Pearl Harbor, where we had the deterioration of the coral from the contamination from the Pearl Harbor ships that was sunk and the oil discharge that is coming into my community? Where are we restoring that? I know they don't show oysters in the water, but what about the restoring of the reef that is dying out there?
Yeah, working in Pearl Harbor is extremely challenging for the state because it's all under the security zone and we don't actually have access. And there's a little bit of a debate between the state and the military in terms of who has jurisdiction over those living resources there. So, you know, with the invasive soft coral that's there, that's been a real challenge for us to even get in the water to survey that area. So I'd say it's a challenging place to work, but I hear you. Work is needed there. I know the Navy is doing some restoration efforts there currently related to the dry dock they're installing, but getting to some of these other issues, yeah, we'll need to work with the military on that.
Just to make something clear, that is our water. They're visitors using our water. Previous name to that area was Pearl Lagoon until they contaminated it. So it's still our water. I don't give a rip about the federal. We need to work it out because it's contaminating my community. Come swim in Eva Beach Park and see if you don't get itchy. So what is we gonna wait to a health hazard to go ahead and figure out what we're gonna do with that coral? Because the military keep on saying these things, but they're not good stewards of our natural resources. So when are we gonna step in as a state, as legislation, and even government up there? Because we're gonna wait to what? Somebody gets sick and die? Because they're leaking. You guys know the fuel is leaking, right? The diesel and all that is leaking. Okay.
Thank
So
you,
it's not a
Senator.
concern.
Thank you. Senator Elefante.
Thank you,
It's
Chair. Thank you, Administrator, and thank you, Elizabeth, for your presentation. Following up to the octocorals in Pearl Harbor, I know you kind of alluded to it in terms of your response in working with federal officials to determine jurisdiction. Have you worked with our Hawaii congressional delegation to look at resources or funding so that it's not all borne upon state?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. We are in active discussions with the delegation. I believe Congressman Case actually got in the water in December to actually view the invasive octocoral, and he's in active conversations with the military to try to bring in some funding, because it's going to take considerable resources to be able to deal with 80 plus acres of invasive soft coral. And then the other thing is making sure it doesn't spread outside of Pearl Harbor to other places. So Lizzie and her team are setting up surveys to, detect anything, hopefully not, but any early detection of spread.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Chelsea?
Our next department is going to be the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, and we're going to kick it off with the plant industry, and I'll have them come up here, introduce themselves while I get them set up. I also don't know exactly who from the team is coming up first.
Good afternoon, Chair Gabbard, Chair Inouye, Chair Lowen, Chair Gates, Senators and Representatives. My name is Darcy Oishi, Acting Manager for the Pest Control Branch. Jonathan Hull with Plant Quarantine.
I'm the Acting Administrator for the plant industry. My name is Carol Okada.
Good afternoon, Greg Takishima, Pesticides Program Manager.
Okay, I'm going to start off with our first slide, and I can tell you, you might see that bottom portion where we have virtually doubled the amount of cargo that is cleared, but as you can see by the amount we intercept, it has drastically dropped to where we're at one point, we're intercepting about 2,000 or more insects per year, dropping now to 500 or so. But the real problem with these insects and diseases that we're not intercepting is the amount of the NKOs are not known to occur that we are not finding also. And there's a lot of things attributing to this, but the fact is that we are given directives, and there are priorities within our department. As our resources slide, the policies change, where are the issues? Because most of these parcels are food related. They're the produce, they're the food, they're the feed for the animals. A lot of these cannot stop, even though we know that there's a risk when we clear them. And so that is the biggest issue for us. We are supposed to be the first line of defense, and we're not there. That is a bad statement. And when we first came across this, I had to tell you, I had to run to the chair and to the deputy to say, do we tell them this? This is so bad. Do we say that so much is coming through? And they said, yes. Be direct. Be honest. This is what I was brought in to fix. This is what we intend to fix. So there are a number of things. Go to the next slide. The problem with the plant quarantine branch is that although we're called plant quarantine, we do everything from microorganisms to non-domestic animals to the fruits and vegetables you see, the seafood you eat. So pretty much everything. So we are staffed with 91 inspectors. They must first be able to make sure it is on the right list of things. So you have to get the entry status, whether it can come in or not. And at first, I was thinking, well, how do we resolve it? Do we say that we put things off the plate? We get rid of regulating microorganisms. Do we get rid of doing the fish and the seafood industry and the aquaculture? Do we get rid of the birds and everything else? And I can hear from them that would be quite a problem if we gave off that task. But because we are spread out because of that, we're not looking at what brings in the insects and diseases. Next slide. So what we normally supposed to do, our primary, is to look at the agricultural products coming in, because these are the things that are bringing in the insects and diseases. This is what, although we're doing it, we're not doing it to the level we were once doing it. So say before I left, we sent one inspector to each food or produce wholesaler. We spent the time to inspect the boxes, look at it, see if there were insects that we are here already, they're not going to pose additional problems, or do we take that product and destroy it? We now go, one inspector will take, it's called for the East Oahu, they will have to cover Costco Hawaii Kai, Sam's Keamoku, Walmart Keamoku. They are not given the time to be able to really look at that product, because the other one is worse. The Central Oahu inspector, one inspector, has to cover Costco Ivalai, Island Green, Otani, Cho, Manson, Kano Truckee, Arms, Safeway, International Express, Hawaii Produce Express, and HPC Foods. The West is similar. So what happens is these 25, 40-foot containers come in, and we literally cannot inspect because we have to cover what's coming through the air. Coming through the air, 2 to 3 FedEx 777s land at the airport daily. Normally, sometimes even higher, but that's 40,000 cartons that we've got to sift through that comes in on the conveyor belt, and we got to be able to take off. They do there. We add to removing off the belt, inspecting it, and putting it back on. These are the ones that we feel are the riskiest, so we put the manpower there because they're the ones, that's how the fish get through, the flowers get through, the illegal animals get through, so we put the priority there. But imagine, that's 40,000 parcels daily in a matter of 3 hours, because that's 3 777s. We have one person held back to cover the rest of the airport. But at the same time, we have UPS coming down, dropping 2 planes, and we have the military going, and that's where you have this very large gap in prevention. Next slide. Knowing how important it is, we were thinking we go back in for a risk assessment, because that one box of leafy green lettuce back in the day when we did risk assessments really did it. He had to ID it, so he knows. I gave him a bag of vials from 1 carton of green leaf lettuce, and it held all those things and all those multitude of vials. These insects and diseases are the things that do harm to our agriculture, but also to the natural resources, because they don't know about lines. The farms can manage it through chemicals and whatever means they need to. But back beyond that, a lot of times if it's, say, a slug, what are you going to do to kill that slug? What are you going to do to kill the slug that's in the forest areas? How are you going to manage it? So the best thing we did was you take care of it at the port. Don't let it get past the port, because then the cost of controlling it gets proportionally so much higher. Next. This one, the brown tree snake, we have gone after. We had funds last year from the legislature, so we're training all the inspectors. Going to Guam, there's one over there, and you can see it's a little bit feisty. But we're having to make sure that when we send people out, they cannot just find them in the wild, but they know the difference between one snake and the next for their safety. There's some you can probably grab by hand, but there's others that you shouldn't be very close to because they're very venomous. So we had one inspector that didn't know it was a cobra, and he thought it was dead because it was kind of cold, so it was kind of hibernating. But when it warmed up in our weather, the hood came up, we were told at that time, there's no venom type of treatment here that can be flown in time for him to remain alive. So the training of this is critical to the inspectors. They need to know the difference between the venomous and non-venomous, and if this brown tree snake gets loose, how to see it in the wild. So part of that 1 week, and we have Will here, who's our main trainer, to be able to see it. Because after a while, I can tell you, you can see it. Next one. This is, I think I'm missing a slide. Okay, never mind. Okay, Koki, we're having, besides the one in Palolo, we're having some in Waimanalo. We're dealing with, but Palolo is more of that they don't want chemical because it's going down the stream, so we're going out to do hand capture. With Waimanalo, we're able to spray, so we do it with the help of our partners. And so that is pretty much under control as far as under control means. Next one. Okay, this is the one we really fear. This is the one we don't have any viable solutions for, and we know it's moving. This is the red imported fire ant. It is moving. It moved to Europe recently. And they're blaming US and they're blaming China, but we don't know. We just know that it's moving. We intercepted it twice. It is very nasty. And if little fire ant is bad, this is much worse, because this is the one that sends you to the hospitals. When Taiwan got it, they told us that they found that Asian people are much more susceptible to the stings. That's what makes it worse. And so we did have where we were working with our Taiwan counterparts, because they were very good at finding non-chemical solutions to this. But this is the pest we really fear, because when we were in Taiwan, the kids would not walk on grass. Because once one ant stings, it sets out the pheromone, that all of them come out of this nest, and the mound is the higher one. Next one. So here we turn over it to Darcy.
So I'm gonna, after the border, the biosecurity mission of the rest of our programs is really simple. It's find it, identify it, and kill it. To find it, we have various activities. PQ, which Carol covered, includes inspection of the materials, entering the state, and also certification programs and compliance programs. With PPC, we also do certification programs. So this is important. These certification programs include ensuring pollinator security for, it's basically the Western world. Because we handle all of North America with our queens. Thank you, Rep. Kahaloa, for your industry. And survey programs. And then a big component of our programs are reports from the public, because changes in how things move have resulted in changes on where pests are getting established and subsequently first being detected. So identification, this is a key aspect, because identification is a definitive identification tells us what it is, what it's going to do, how to kill it, what the long-term impacts are going to be. So we need rapid ability to have definitive identifications, and at this point in time, we have severe capacity issues and to be honest, we've always had severe capacity issues in this regard. Comparable states have multiple specialists working on identifications for insects and diseases, mollusks, nematodes. We have 2 people. And then we need to have how we're going to kill it. So my program, Plant Pest Control, develops control tactics and then evaluates and researches control programs. And Greg's program, the pesticide programs, helps us evaluate our recommendations so they make sure we're not violating federal law. Recommend alternative chemistries. So sometimes we can have a product, an active ingredient that we know is effective, but some of these chemistries cannot be used in specific locations. So for LFA control, we can tell there's 6 different Amdro formulations, but not every Amdro formulation can be used everywhere. So Greg's program helps make sure we're making recommendations and executing plans that are following the label. The label is the law. And then when we need it, obtaining exemptions and assisting us with getting special labels and licenses. So in this case, for instance, for coconut rhinoceros beetle, Greg's program helped us get a crisis exemption. We're working on a quarantine exemption to allow the usage of demon max on the islands of Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii. We do not have permission to use it on Oahu. So these solutions are a critical aspect of what the pesticides program does to assist us in the development of all of these recommendations. I will also add, there's a neonicotinoid bill that if I was gonna bring a slipper, but I forgot. Carol told me I'm not allowed to take off my shoe because I don't wanna offend anybody, because that will eliminate a lot of our pest control products, and I don't want my staff having to use slippers to kill bugs in the field. Because we need those emergency response tools, and neonicotinoids are not just used for my program, but cockroach sprays, ant sprays at home. A lot of these are neonicotinoids. So, but Greg can answer questions about that if you need it. So this is what our needs are. Some of our needs include moving inspectors from cargo fee to general fund. For pesticides, it's moving staff from the pesticide use revolving fund to the general fund. For plant pest control branch, I'm the oldest program. Going back to Kingdom days, we haven't had a significant revamp in almost as long. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, Chelsea. Any questions?
Yes. Okay. I'll make it quick as well. Regarding the security at the airport, and you already identified we have new aircrafts coming in. FedEx has increased its fleet as well. Big box distributors like Amazon. Does Amazon bring in their own aircraft and then drive their merchandise to the new facility? Or how is monitoring being done with these new, companies that are coming in?
So Jonathan Ho, acting plant quarantine branch manager. So with regards to Amazon, Amazon does have their own planes, and they also do contract through existing commercial carriers. Excuse me. Currently, right now, the goods that are imported are contracted out through specific vendors, and the goods are presented for inspection. With regards to the new facilities,
So the inspectors inspect the cargoes as well?
So with regards to service vessels, if the goods are manifested, the containers are presented for inspection.
Okay, by you folks or private?
By us.
Oh, okay.
For agricultural goods, and then they are building some new facilities, and we're going to be working with them.
So that's in addition, any more new aircrafts coming in, big box, then you have more responsibilities. Okay, now going back to the brown tree snake, if I remember during my early years in the early 2000s, I was chairing ag as well. most of the brown tree snakes were coming in via the military aircrafts. So it was easy to identify. I mean, because they're hanging on, right? They're on the tires. That's what I went out to see one anyway on the tarmacs. But so with regards to those that are, and I understand some are coming in on luggage. Is that correct, or only through?
It's mostly through the aircraft, but also in the cargo holds of the military aircraft.
Okay, with regards to that, since the military has been bringing those hitchhikers has been coming in, has it continued? And reason I ask is then we should go after the military as well to see if they can contribute and give us some resources to add to your budget. Because it seems like they were responsible for, I'm not sure how many of the local aircrafts are coming in from Guam. I don't know if Hawaiian is, but just to ask that perhaps if we, we've known for a long time that military aircrafts were bringing those.
And I think the concern is that because it's how the military is moving, and right now they're having two fronts, Asia and the Middle East. And because of that, we're getting slammed by two sides, two types of different pest issues. And so recently we had one military that had rats, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Rats. And we get very concerned because of health issues.
Okay.
And so we have to notify and make sure that the rats don't pose a problem.
Well, maybe it's something that we can deal with, how we can look for resources from the military. And I saw one of your persons coming in here too.
Oh, yeah, he's a
snake guy.
Yeah, he's our snake guy.
Okay, sorry. I know we need to push our hearings much quicker.
Sorry.
But
My name is Will Leon Guerrero, so I'm in charge of our brown tree snake program. Regarding your question for the military, if this is continuing, the snakes coming in, the USDA Wildlife Services on Guam are doing an excellent job by preventing the snakes leaving Guam. Okay, so any aircraft that leaves Guam, they're going to be inspected by USDA Wildlife Services. We are secondary inspection when they come to Guam because not everything is perfect. They had a storm last year on Guam, and one snake was found on an aircraft going to Saipan, and another snake was found in a cargo hold in a ship. This is right after the storm, so we have to be vigilant and do our part in Hawaii to prevent that from happening here. But they're doing an excellent job. We haven't had a brown tree snake since the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
I can add one thing to that, to what Will said. So we have inspectors that inspect any flight that comes from Guam, Northern Australia, basically any place where BTS is known to either be established or in its native range. So all of these flights and ships that are coming in, whether they're military or domestic, are inspected. So we have staff that are basically on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think last year we did about, 1,100 flights, and I think we caught 99.2% of them, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, I mean, as Will said, we're working with USDA to make sure that, obviously BTS isn't coming in. We spend a lot of resources doing that, and we get a federal grant as well to help manage that.
Carol, in your program, you continue to say use NKO insects. For those on YouTube and other, what is NKO insects?
NKO means not known to occur in Hawaii.
Okay, all right, just so everybody knows, because you haven't completed that word NKO. Everybody's wondering what NKO is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Senator Pavella?
Yeah, just a couple of things, because in my community, we have all this, I just wanted to know what would be your guys' grassroots approach to eliminating the rhinoceros beetle and the red ants, especially in my community. We have all these black boxes that look like some kind of Christmas decoration. And all the trees are dying in Oniwala Beach Park, Community Park. I mean, it's not just, people saying it's just to the coconut tree, but it's moving on. And then in our areas, because we have a lot of the red ants too, and it's just, right now, it's gonna be a problem for Hawaiian homes, because the area that have the red ants right now that didn't spread across the street is at Pu'aloa Beach Park. There's a big infestation of the red ants over there, and I don't know if the city or anybody had made any efforts, but what is the, I mean, what's happening with it? Because all of our coconut trees are
Okay.
on the top.
So previous to this, Kate's group, the CRB task force, had these federal grants that were able to pretty much keep the spread to Oahu. That's not great, but it managed to keep it on island. And that takes a lot of effort. But this past year has jumped to Kauai, Maui, and Big Island. And while we were going out to Waianae and Ewa and all the areas that have had to deal with it for 10 years, that was our first thing we were going to do. And then, of course, the neighbor island outbreaks happened. Maui fire happened, and we had to switch these out. We are going to work with the community to develop what they want to do. So as far as Oahu, normally we work with the neighbor island mayors to see how they want us to engage in these actions. With Oahu, it seemed like, you know, we just can do it. They're not being very, but they have cooperated and agreed to working with an MOU, so we can do at least the golf courses and the parks and recreational areas. So we can do those surveys, at least to do the surveys, and then we discuss talks on how do we treat. And so those will be coming shortly.
And Senator, just to jump in, we have a specific presentation from CRB
Yes.
response team that will update you on the situation and can ask specific questions
Yeah.
if we have time.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rep. Cochran.
Thank you.
Hang on.
Because
Hang-
I just wanted to let you guys know, because when you guys come to Manpower on the west side, from Ewa Beach to Waianae Coast, and you guys don't have enough, I think you guys should be thinking about educating the community. Like back in the day, bottled water supply used to test water and they couldn't get them, so they get the volunteer guys check the water. I think we should start getting out there and being more proactive, because we're losing our vegetation, especially in on the west side of Oahu.
Thank you,
Okay.
Thank
Rep.
you.
Cochran, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, and thank you, DeFiran. It's good to see you folks and for your time of the other day. And it was very alarming going to the airports, and thank you for the work. But are we looking at other countries like Australia, New Zealand for dog sniffing type of purposes? Beagles, I believe they use there. Do we have?
We did that in the past. We always have a problem of retention of those trained people, because as soon as they're trained, pretty much go off to the feds because they pay more. So what we're going to try rethink how we do it. They are important, because a beagle and baggage claim does way better than all our inspection and all these other tools. Just seeing that beagle in motion. Right now we have no beagles. They're only for cargo. They do handle our UPS, so we do handle UPS using those dogs. And so they are beneficial. We do want to increase. The problem with Hawaii and Australia, and of course one is a country, they have very little agricultural cargo coming in compared to the size of the population. And that's the problem. It's because we don't grow enough of our food that we're dependent on all these things coming in that brings in the invasive species. So if we want to be able to grow more, especially of the ones that bring us the most pests.
Lettuce.
Right.
Thank you. And real quickly, Chair, the neonic, I'd love to work with you folks on wording, because we're just trying to change the classification to RUP. But anyway, I'll just stop at that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kahaloa.
Thank you, Chair Gates. Quick question. Thank you for your presentation relating to the koki frogs. If you can give an update on any remediation efforts on Hawai'i Island.
Okay, so
because you focused the slide on Oahu.
Yes. So we just met Glenn Sacco last week, and he's what we're doing is normally, because we've had this break in biosecurity programming, normally we meet with the mayor and see where where he wants us to do. And so we propose, do we really initiate the sprayer loan program, to initiate the chemical supplies. And so he's requested a meeting for us to meet with the mayor to discuss those issues. And then what we do is we put what the county's issues. So each county provides us a list of issues that they want us to manage or to start, and that's where that is. He wants to return the sprayers right now, so I think we may have to do it internally, like we let the community borrow it, or we provide the citric acid. If the county prefers not to do it because of lack of resources too, we may need to ask for a person to be able to do it on that island within the Department of Ag.
So just to clarify, currently the state is not doing any remediation or providing financial resources to koki frog remediation on Hawai'i Island.
I'm pretty sure that, yeah, it was paused because otherwise he wouldn't be returning the sprayers.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Thank you for being here. As I noticed, within the past 5 to 10 years, invasive species has become worse across the state. Can you, in a nutshell, tell us why things have gotten so bad, and can we win this fight, or are we going to be more so just trying to mitigate the impacts that these invasives have?
I think because of our programming kind of paused for this 10-year time, invasive species has really mounted. We just went backwards as far as personnel and funding. And so we are asking for it to be brought up to at least the current levels, knowing that we cannot hire as much people as we need in 1 year. What we're trying to do is do a coordinated effort to feel where all the needs are. If Maui has 14 inspectors and they have 5% of the gate of what is coming in, we would need 200 for Oahu. We're not going to ask for 200 for Oahu, but we do need the tools to be able to know which cargo we need to inspect, which type of products we need to say no. We need to support this growth of this particular industry because that imported commodity brings in pests. So what we intend to do for the agricultural segment is we want to promote providing clean germplasm to start, providing pest management strategies in the fields, and then having the ability to treat, marshal, get it to the appropriate markets, whichever is within island, to the neighbor island, or to the mainland or foreign, have it pest-free. And that's the plan. I think that's a long-term solution because that will grow agriculture, means importing less invasive species.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chelsea? Yes. Okay.
So I understand what you guys are trying to accomplish. Where does that lie with the different wholesalers that are importing full cargo imports of produce?
What we're going to have to do, because it's been 10 years since we've really been inspecting them, we're going to have to bring back a letter to inform them that we have signed this memorandum with the Matson and Pashas to say, okay, we release you from the port, that 40-foot container, but you're supposed to hold it for inspection, and we are going to inspect. That is the start.
Have you inspected their their areas, knowing that the bulk of the produce that come in is coming in foreign, not under food safety?
Yes, that's a concern too, because what's going to happen, okay, we're having food safety concerns from foreign imports. We're also having higher pesticides residuals. So clearly you want to grow it. Mainland is much safer than foreign, but the United States in itself is importing more agricultural products.
So I guess what I'm saying is, are you guys looking at incurring fines upon those imports that are coming from outside of the state, not food safety certified, to meet the needs of your last slide on the inspections and funds that you folks will need to address the problem we're trying to talk about today in combating biosecurity?
We plan to. Right now, we are federally preempted. During my time, I was gone for a while, during my time, we didn't abide by federal preemption. So say the bell peppers were loaded with a psyllid. We didn't want it. We took the challenge. We knew that we wouldn't be protected. If it's the product was from, say, South America, we're not supposed to touch it to the final consumer. But we're ready to take the $30,000 hit for stopping that insect rather than dealing with that insect after the fact. So we were doing it. Whether we did it for the food safety side, not a lot, because we need that pathologist. We don't have the capacity, and that's the problem. So what we were going to be doing is we were going to do it for next year when finances were better for the state, but we're getting a lot of requests to say, no, why don't you say it now? And if the money comes available towards the end of the legislature, maybe we can allow some.
Okay.
So now we can take this offline later, but I think the solution would be final, so that it doesn't just fall on the back of the state budget to address a lot of the issues that you guys having to deal with. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Chelsea?
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm really going to have to enforce the time, just with our presenters. So next up is Raquel Wong from the animal industry, and I'll just let her jump into it.
All right, well, I'll try to make up the time. So hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Wong. I am a veterinary medical officer with the Animal Industry Division for the Department of Agriculture. Dr. Baeta, our administrator, sends his regrets. He had a pre-scheduled event. All right, so we're just going to jump right in. Okay, so what this opportunity is for us to kind of talk a little bit about what animal industry does. And we basically have three functions. We are a disease response agency, as well as we regulate animal movement, and we also do provide commodity support, especially in the arenas of aquaculture with our aquaculture and livestock services branch. Okay, I did include a little bit of information about chronic wasting disease in deer. This kind of highlights the other role that we do sometimes play, which is the intersection between the environment, human health, and animal health. So for chronic wasting disease in deer, this is a disease that has actually been known since the 60s. And what we've been observing is across the country, the USDA has been giving money to states' departments of agriculture to see how that disease has been moving across the country. So at this time, there has been no detections in Hawaii, and I leave it up to our friends at DLNR to notify us if they need any assistance on the diagnostic side. Okay. So the Animal Industry Division has been performing biosecurity tasks since, basically since pre-statehood. We do it through a variety of methods, including at the pre-entry, through making sure that those animals are properly identified, as well as they are inspected before they leave their state. Also at the border with the review of documents. And then finally, once they do arrive here, certain species are required to have post-arrival testing, and as well as isolation from the resident animals for a period of time to see if diseases do occur. We collaborate very closely with our federal partners, especially USDA Veterinary Services, for awareness with diseases of high consequence. So some of the emerging threats that we are concerned about, my slide's going to take a bit. So one of the big things in the last few years has been African swine fever. This is a hemorrhagic fever that attacks only swine species, none of the other species, and not humans. But it's basically endemic in Asia. And of all the foreign animal diseases, and what a foreign animal disease means, it's a disease that's foreign to the United States. It does not occur at all in the US, and there is great concern to make sure it does not come into the US because it will affect global trading markets, especially in the animal commodities world. So in African swine fever in the case, because Hawaii has such a close relationship with Asia, this is the one that we are very diligent about making sure that we inform our producers about what to look for, as well as work closely with both USDA and Customs Border Patrol to sort of identify those key entry points where it potentially could come into Hawaii or the rest of the US. As you can see, the US pork industry is highly valued. It's about $28 billion, and any type of incursion would cost about at least $15 billion in the first 2 years. And that's only if it doesn't get into the feral swine population, which of course is a potential for it to happen. The interesting thing about this particular virus is that it can actually move, it's pretty stable, and it can move in different ways, including not just sick animals, but also can move on human visitors, foreign visitors that have traveled into farms to maybe visit, as well as garbage. Hawaii is a state that does have some garbage feeding amongst its producers. But again, we do rely heavily on Customs Border Patrol to prevent that foreign garbage from coming into our shores and eventually making it into the feed chain. The other one that you may have been hearing about a lot in recent years, of course, is avian influenza. This is a disease where poultry, like turkeys and chickens, are highly susceptible. However, the interesting thing about this virus is that wild birds can carry it with little or no symptoms. So on the US mainland, the concern is because it does move on the migratory birds, that's often how it gets introduced into the farm locations. So practicing excellent biosecurity is a good way to prevent that disease from coming in. Good hygiene practices, making sure that the birds are protected and don't mix with the wild population. Again, the one advantage Hawaii does have is we are a tropical environment, so the virus itself likes cold weather, and that's why it occurs in the wintertime. But we see the effects of the disease on the US mainland because you'll see your egg prices go up, or you'll see the broiler prices go up because right now the USDA's response is eradication, so they do have to depopulate flocks that do have positive findings. And then, of course, that reduces the population available for replacement, as well as for layers and eggs and things like that. If anything were one potential introductory way, of course, we do have some migratory birds, especially our plovers, which come from Alaska. And so, again, that is something that we work with our partners in the USGS federal agency as far as testing those wild birds if they should, when they come into Hawaii. Okay, the one thing that's kind of more local in nature is exotic ticks. So ticks, everybody's probably familiar with them if you have a dog. Hawaii does have ticks. We have 2 endemic species. One is the brown dog tick, which is the typical tick that most people will identify on their pets. And then there is something else called a spinous ear tick, which tends to occur in livestock. We don't see those very often. What we don't have are the ticks that are on these images. So ticks that are important, such as the deer tick, which carries the human Lyme disease. There's also Rocky Mountain wood ticks. Those carry a tick paralysis type disease, which can affect animals and stuff. So we are diligent in making sure that the animals that are coming into our state are both treated prior to entry, they're inspected, and then, of course, in some cases, especially with horses, they are treated once they do arrive here. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of some of the animal inspections that we've done in last year. And as you can see, we inspect a variety of animals. I like to say our friends at PQ are the gatekeepers. They tell us what is allowed and not allowed, and we set the conditions on how those animals will come into the state. All right. And that's it. That's all I have. And so if you have any questions about animal industry, please let me know.
Raquel?
Yes.
Question, additional funding, what kind of funding are we looking at?
In terms
that
of...
you need for your...
Oh, wow. I'm going to defer that
You
to...
okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. So,
Okay,
you know, if I had my wish...
Sorry, I asked.
Well, so Dr. Maeda is our administrator, so he may have words with me on Monday. But, you know, as far as money is concerned, I think animal industry, you know, really what we could use is improvement to our facilities, as well as, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, is being able to compensate our staff at a level at which they can make a living wage. So veterinarians, unfortunately, there is at least a 30% gap between the current state salaries as well, you know, as even from introductory private vet going into private practice. So there's a gap there. So that's one level of funding. Facilities, improvements. We do have some money that's coming for our animal quarantine station, but we also have facilities not just there, but also at the airport, which is the major traffic point that's coming into Honolulu, and then also neighbor island facilities. So that's where the funding would be.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Senator?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Dr. Wong. I may be a little partial to this area of the Department of Agriculture. Staffing. Rough percentage of what you're down. What do we need to recruit to fill your people needs?
Well, staffing, I would say, and again, Dr. Mehta may have words with me on Monday, would probably be, again, like along with the department, looking at more of a holistic approach in terms of what the positions need to do and what we are able to do. So, for example, the easiest thing I could talk about would be the veterinary medical side of it. It's difficult to recruit and retain professional level veterinarians, just because, number one, the salary, and then number two, the cost of living here is very expensive. So that would be the first hurdle. We have gaps. Luckily, we have our neighbor island veterinarians, but we're seeing the population move to the neighbor islands. So increasing their numbers on the neighbor islands would be a great way of making sure that that area is covered. And then looking at our positions, because we do rely on non-professional staff, the technical staff as well, and increasing their compensation to the amount of work that they're capable of doing.
Okay. So across the board, somewhere between 20 and 30% of open positions. Is that about the same in your department?
I think it's actually more close to 40%.
Okay.
Because of the 10 positions, veterinary positions we have 3 that are missing.
Okay, Chair. Yeah, I realized we had a lot of information to get through, but thank you, Dr. Wong.
Thank you. Anyone from the House? Okay, Chelsea? Okay, one more question.
So you talk about chronic wasting, chronic disease wasting in deer. How big of a problem is that here in Hawaii?
None that we know of.
Are you well aware of the population of deer in Maui County and the waste that is going out? That's the response.
Well, the disease itself has not occurred in Hawaii.
The chronic waste I'm talking about.
The chronic waste, what, due to lack of feed and starvation?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, that's different than the disease. So yes, that's a sad situation.
So what is the department wanting to do about that? Do you guys have something in the works that you guys are willing to do to address that?
We would defer to our partners at DLNR, Forestry and Wildlife, for management of the wildlife population.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I just got a quick question. When it comes to the disease and whatnot, what I don't understand is when they like especially like for the deer, right? They run around and causing havoc. So you guys don't know what I don't say what disease they carry, but what disease can occur for the the deer and the overpopulating with human beings and their their waste and whatnot. What can occur for safety and well-being for the humans?
Again, it's probably good practices in terms of when they harvest, making sure that they're harvesting those deer in a way that follows food safety guidelines. That would probably be their best method of being able to prevent any transmission, if there are any. But usually, at least at this point, I am not aware of any diseases that humans could get. I take that back. Except for brucellosis, and that would be, having good practice when you harvest the animals would be your best prevention.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Chelsea?
Mahalo, Dr. Wong. Next up, we'll have Matt Carano from the Department of Health, Environmental Health Services Division, and he is the Environmental Health Program Administrator.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chairs of many of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Matt Carano. I'm very recent to this position. This is only my second week in the job, but my previous position was with our department as in our vector control program, and some of you may know me for my time prior to that doing enforcement with the Clean Water Branch in the Department of Health. So thank you for this opportunity. I really do appreciate it. I'm here today to talk about biosecurity within the context of the Department of Health. We care about biosecurity because when the disease comes and an organism comes that can spread it, that's when we have the potential for outbreaks and, even worse, establishment of the diseases within our community. This is directly related to biosecurity because Hawaii, as you guys all know, has been paradise. We don't really have the organisms that can spread the disease, and fortunately, we don't have a lot of the diseases that are actually spread by organisms. Just giving you an example, in the South Pacific, Southeast Asia, we have dengue, Zika, chikungunya. These are all spread by mosquitoes. They occur in large swaths of the world. In sub-Saharan Africa and other places now, Florida included, malaria. These are spread by mosquitoes as well. Hawaii shouldn't have the mosquitoes that spread them. And fortunately, we've never had the disease established here to the point where we have to just live with it as an endemic disease. With respect to biosecurity, we have a branch, our vector control branch in the Environmental Health Services Division, my new division, my former home. Very sweet spot for that. Our priorities right now has to be partnerships. You've seen and you heard from all my colleagues, my wonderful esteemed colleagues. I like to call a lot of them friends. They might not, but I do. And the partnerships starts with Department of Transportation. If I'm saying that we have to prevent things from coming in, our ports of entry is the biggest piece of this. It occurs on all islands. As travel increases across the Pacific and through the world, we see more domestic flights, international flights through multiple ports of entries. As I sit and I listen to the plights of our colleagues at Planned Quarantine and others, I hear the stress. These are the things that keep me up at night as well, just the volume that comes through. And the ability for and there's some horror stories or case studies we could discuss at some other time, but if the right conditions exist for that organism to come in, it can establish on very episodic moments. It doesn't take a constant inundation. And as we say in health, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Once something comes in, it's very hard to get rid of. Let's think of coqui frogs. But if we can prevent it from establishing, that's our best way to keep us all healthy and safe. We need to expand our partnerships within the state. We may not be the point of the spear for biosecurity, but our personnel have a lot of skills that under the guidance of our sister agencies, we can provide them help when there are incursions. We have to really talk about our partnerships with the DoD. As you saw in many slides, our vulnerabilities lie in how the DoD comes in and out of Hawaii, oftentimes outside of the oversight of the state. The world's changing, everybody knows. I know that's thrown around a lot. Our programs tend to change a little slower sometimes. Sometimes it's new people, sometimes it's new ideas, sometimes it's a recognition of this world changing. And it starts with really looking at our programs and looking at how they're constructed, why they're constructed, and how we're implementing that. And I think, we have to start by looking within, and I know all programs should be doing it, but under at least my watch that just started, I'm certainly going to be looking within. In our vector program, for instance, we knew that we were really, really focusing on when a disease got here because we reestablished the program after the dengue outbreaks. But now we have to shift to preventing the species from getting here and establishing. And I think that's going to change the construct and our approach a little bit. You hear it from everyone. I've heard it from you folks. Workforce. We don't need to belabor why it's difficult, but these are specialized people with specialized skills. And it's very difficult for us as well. And I'll answer the question before it's asked. 27%. That's what our vacancy rate is. And largely for the very same reasons. Again, my esteemed counterparts and friends in our sister agencies, we use the same position classifications. We have entomologists, and they're difficult to find, on neighbor islands in particular. We have to look at getting smarter. We can be more efficient, but we also have to be smarter strategically on what we attack and where we attack it. And I think that there is a need for us to do some research. Now, we're not a research institution. We're not a university. We're not research for research purposes. We have data quality objectives. We want to know where our yellow fever mosquitoes are on the Big Island so that we can try to go after those populations. Because if somebody comes back from the South Pacific with dengue virus, which does happen, unfortunately, for them, if they land in a community where we don't know that the risk is higher because we don't know the population dynamics, we may not respond as effectively as we really need to exercise that ounce of prevention. And we need to know what our biggest vulnerabilities are as the climate changes. We can give you examples of birds with avian malaria, and if that's not a canary in the coal mine situation, I really don't know what is. Maybe Chelsea, I can help you make up some time, but our branch is the vector control branch, and it's really about disease vectors. But health and wellness, and I think we can all appreciate this, is more than staying disease-free. And maybe there was that bright, shining line in the past, but why I keep bringing up all of my friends at the other agencies is that, we have to be having these conversations, and HISC has been just so invaluable to even bringing me into the fold. And the good work that they're doing, that I look forward to integrating our biosecurity plans going forward, kind of understanding that DOH's role in this is not simply just when people get sick, but it's really keeping people healthy and protecting way of life. And that has so much to do with being able to go outside without pesticide on, without worrying about biting flies and other potential, vectors of disease, but also organisms that impact our way of life. So thank you, and I look forward to any kind of questions.
Question, Matt. What are you mentioned our vulnerabilities. What are the top ones right now? And if you don't have that research done yet, when do you expect to have it done?
No, sir. I think that's a question that I absolutely should be able to answer. And from a disease standpoint, I think it's being very conscious of two things. The disease is all around us, and that's Hawaii's story, right? That's our historic legacy. We have to be really, really conscious about being able to act very aggressively when it comes in. So I'll give you just examples without any specific detail, but we have patients come into that get through our chain, get identified as having dengue virus and being infected. And there's certain windows of opportunity in which to intervene where they're the most infectious, and we have to be able to act at that time. We don't always have that capacity and never had in the past. So being nimble with the type of staff we have, the training that we have, and the workforce that when we're able to act, I think is one big vulnerability. The second 30,000-foot vulnerability is that climate change is changing things. The real horror story, which is fortunately not the case, but I'll share it, it's twofold. If we ever get the establishment of Anopheles mosquitoes in Hawaii, the ones that transmit malaria, fortunately we don't have any. And I talk to our staff knows, these are things that we have an aggressive surveillance program. When we have somebody coming in with malaria, and we will set up mosquito traps around that person's house just to reassure ourselves that we don't have an Anopheles mosquito. So that's one type of vulnerability. The second, funny, One Health is this concept where it's the overlapping of what you're good to the animals, you're good to the planet, it's good to the people. It revolves around deer in Hawaii. What we don't have are deer ticks, is what Dr. Wong hadn't said. But some of the diseases that she talked about can be spread. What if we do get deer ticks? And now we have Lyme disease. Once it's here, people are going to get sick. And it's not about monetary cost benefit anymore. It's about like way of life, right? Those are things that keep me up. Those are our biggest vulnerabilities on my side.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Matt. It's nice to see you. I didn't understand with this murine typhus. It looks like it's an issue. You have it in your PowerPoint. So how prevalent, or, I mean, unfortunately, with the fires in Lahaina, 11 feral cats adopted me. So I'm like, oh my God, they're on more feral stray cats. So I'd like to know a little bit more about this and the dangers.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate the question, Manny. I put it in there as an example of something that's like people don't always know because we don't engage the way we do. And I'd like to talk about public involvement one day if we ever have time. Marine typhus is a type of disease transmitted through fleas, often through rodents. And we know we have it in Kihei. The research that we haven't done in the past is really, it's been a while, and there's a history with the vector control branch of having been largely abolished in 2008 during the Great Recession and only being re-stood up largely through the efforts of HISC and your committees in 2018. And then we all took the COVID stand down, so we're reworking hard. But we need to identify, we're going out with a project this year internally because this is things that are core functions to us, to really go and identify where else is it. Because if I'm the public, I want to know that, and I want to know that DOH is doing something about it, but it does start with us actually doing surveys for it, which we haven't done in 20 years.
Thank you very much, Matt. Chelsea?
Thank you.
Yeah, mahalo, Matt. Next up is going to be Dr. Mike Melzer with the University of Hawaii, and I'm just going to be combining people right now. And so also Keith Weiser from the Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle Response Team. And we have one last set of presentations after these ones, and I really want to make sure you guys hear from our community members that came from Windward, Oahu to share their Mana'o perspective here today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, chairs, co-chairs, and committee members. My name is Mike Melzer. I'm with the University of Hawaii. I'm speaking on behalf of my administration, who unfortunately could not make it. So I'll be representing them for an update, and I'll try and keep this brief for time constraints. University of Hawaii recognizes the importance of invasive species. They've stated this on several occasions, and within CTAR, invasive species management is definitely a priority, both through our three pillars, which is teaching, research, and extension. We belong to, in addressing that, we belong with several different agencies on a national and local level to combat some of these invasive species. But I'm getting more focused on the department that I belong to, which is Plant Environmental Protection Sciences, because even though within the college we have a lot of researchers and agents that are indirectly or directly working with invasive species, it's our department that basically spearheads the efforts. We have currently 12 tenure track faculty in the department. This is a major low for, I think, our department. Since we last talked, I think we've lost one. So we're down to 11 in Manoa and 1 on Kauai for our department. So we're not necessarily well represented across the state. But the people we have are very good. For the first time in maybe 5 or 6 years, we're actually recruiting new people in our department, and they're actually key for our department. One includes our pesticide safety. This is going to be an agent position. So not necessarily research associated, but they're going to be very important in making sure that people are using pesticides for invasive species control correctly and educating. There's a large need to make sure that people who are in that invasive species community are well trained and doing everything according to the label. We're also looking at a plant pathology specialist. So this will probably be a Big Island-based position to deal with some of the diseases that are occurring here in Hawaii. Specifically for plants. And then we're also looking for an arthropod identification specialist. So there's some hope. We have some hope on the horizon that maybe we're going to get some reinforcements in a largely depleted department. I'm considered one of the new people, and I've been in my position for 10 years, so that sort of tells you where we're at. We do a lot of prevention work. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details here, but this prevention work is done overseas. So we do have efforts to go overseas to look to see what some of the threats are, to try and prevent that. Whether it's, especially in its locations where we don't have a lot of information on some of the pests and diseases. So they're not on our radar, and we want to make sure that some of these things are on our radar. Because a lot of things that come in and do damage were not on anybody's radar previously. We do a lot of early detection work as well. Our department does the majority of the cooperative agricultural pest surveys, or CAPS. These are a federally funded program that basically go around and look to make sure we don't have incipient or nascent populations of damaging insects and pathogens, particularly for some of our major crops. And these are sort of represented here. The one I like to highlight is our every year we look for a disease called citrus greening. This is a disease that Hawaii, fortunately, is one of the HLB, or it's Huanglongbing, or HLB. We're one of the few U.S. States that is where we grow citrus, but we don't have this disease yet. And this is definitely becoming important as we're seeing much more acreage going towards citrus, particularly in Maui County. If you look at how this is decimating a major industry, Florida was the premier citrus producing industry in the world. And you can see with this disease, when it was introduced about 15 years ago, basically has decimated that. So if this disease shows up in Hawaii, if Florida can't prevent it, we don't have much of a chance. So preventing this disease from showing up in Hawaii is critical. We're also involved in some of the rapid response efforts. We see some common ones. We've got sort of the high profile ones, like we'll see coconut rhinoceros beetle, and we'll hear from Dr. Weiser in a second. But some of the other, more minor but important to the individual growers. And that's where we really, with limited personnel in our department, we really have to try and balance these really major pests and diseases versus some of the small growers who don't feel sometimes that they're getting support. So we're always trying to support put some effort their way as well, because they are usually disadvantaged in that if they're growing a smaller crop, we don't necessarily have the resources available to really do a lot of research. And so we have to try and balance some of this with our available funding. We're also looking at long-term management, and this includes both applied and fundamental research. And that's really where we need to get I really feel the need in our department is getting more researchers on this. So I mentioned we have about 12 faculty, but only a few of those are actually researchers. A lot of them are more instruction-oriented or more extension, but there's a lot of good research that can be done to combat invasive species. We just need the personnel, and we also need perhaps some facilities as well to do some of the research. And this is perhaps some of the non-traditional more genetic technologies and pathogen technologies, and me as a pathologist, I'm interested in using pathogens, but we just don't have that opportunity in Hawaii, so we have to rely on our partners overseas for that work. Maybe another somewhat good news, we've heard that there's some openings for positions. 3 faculty members in our department recently received a large educational grant. It's called Pacific Continental Network, and this is a grant between UH Manoa and our department, Leeward Community College, and then friends over in Oklahoma State University. And this is an educational grant specific for biosecurity when it comes to, and invasive species is a highlight of that. So we're bringing in students on this to get them trained, and we're definitely targeting the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders for this. And so that might be an opportunity to get the students abroad to bring them back home and maybe find a career in that if these openings still remain available. And also on the mainland, we're looking at tribal Native American students as well. And the idea is to get people from the community protecting the community, and that's basically the whole goal of this grant. And so that just started last summer, and we've got some of our first students that enrolled last summer and this spring as well. So hopefully in the next 5 years, we're going to be able to pump out some students well educated in biosecurity and invasive species and get them in some of these positions that are needed by state and federal agencies. And with that, I'd just like to acknowledge these are our faculty members. We have actually lost 2. Those are the ones in red to retirement or moving on, and we had a transfer. That's the gentleman in green who's joined our department. With that said, I'll probably turn it over to Dr. Weiser.
Or me.
Or Chelsea.
Thank you, senators and representatives. I'm Keith Weiser, and I'm representing the coconut rhinoceros beetle response today. I'll try to keep it quick so that we have time for questions for both Mike and myself. So this is really just a brief of current status. Some of you are well acquainted with coconut rhinoceros beetle, and for others of you, you might need a little information. This is the insect in question, and you're most likely to run into the adult form or the larva, which are both pictured here. Very large and unmistakable when they're at their largest, but we work on identification in cases where you can't tell. The damage is very distinctive. Boreholes, V-cuts, and some of you can see this in your own neighborhoods. For those who don't live in impacted areas, those will soon be impacted areas on Oahu, and unfortunately some other islands as well. The primary food sources, as you could see in the pictures before, are coconut palms, but also royal palms, date palms, fan palms, and other targets are banana, sugarcane, hala, calo artero, and pineapples. Some types of ferns are likely targets, and cycads as well. So this is the kind of devastation we're now seeing on Oahu in some areas. Just all the trees in some areas completely dead. Some areas of Oahu are largely unaffected, but this is what's at stake if it's uncontrolled, and in worst case scenarios, all of your host plants are going to die. So just some pictures to share of banana and hala, some other targets, what that damage looks like, just to highlight that it's not just a coconut problem. I'm going to go pretty quickly through this, but there's many impacts, economic to remove dead trees, to replace dead trees. Obviously, to farmers, this can be devastating, loss of production for crops, and then cultural. A lot of these plants are important for both Native Hawaiians and other cultures that live within Hawaii for cultural practices and subsistence foods. And then native plants, including lolu, and Mike has been testing a bunch of other hosts that are native plants that could be imperiled. And this could potentially lead to extinction of some rare plants on Oahu. And then the total disruption, the disruptions that this could have on ecosystems could be extremely damaging, and we don't really know what kinds of changes that'll bring. So I'm going to go real quickly through the initial introduction. The initial detection was at Mamala Bay Golf Course, which is right next to Honolulu International Airport, and of course right next to Joint Base Pearl Harbor here. I'm going to go through real quickly how the population spread. So 2014, we were putting up traps across the island. We had that network pretty much in place throughout 2015. So you can see the population there a little bit on the west coast, but mostly near Pearl Harbor. And then the spread was slow initially, and we even got rid of it in some places. So on the west coast, we brought those populations came down. And then Mamala Bay Golf Course, the original site, was free of CRB for a couple of years, but then spread continued across the islands, and as you can see, 2022 is the latest slide I show here, but this trend has continued with spread all across Oahu, and unfortunately to several other islands now, Kauai, Big Island, and Maui. So what kinds of things can be done? What are the tools that are in the toolbox to be done? There are treatments. So treatments of host plants is primarily pesticides, but netting in some cases can be used. For breeding sites, there's fumigation and heat treatment are the primary ones. There's a few other ones, but these are the big ones. Containment, rules that restrict the movement of infested material are important. And population suppression, which goes back to treatments, can help with containment. And then to do the treatments and containment, we need to know where those beetles are. So some level of either trapping, palm damage surveys, and breeding site surveys. Those are the primary tools for finding out where beetles are. So my organization, the CRB Response, just to be clear, sometimes we get confused with Hawaii Department of Agriculture or some other groups. We are a federally funded emergency response. The primary funding is from U.S. Department of Agriculture, and our work currently is mostly restricted to ports and then emergency operations on other islands where eradication might be possible. We get some funds from the Department of Defense. That's primarily restricted to Joint Base and the Waiawa watershed. And then a shout out to DLNR. They, as far as funding, they were instrumental for our early startup for the response, things like our vehicle fleet and getting us off the ground in the early days. And of course, our good partners now as well. So what's currently being done, I'm going to go brief. There's a lot on these. I'm not going to cover everything on the slides, but you can check these out later if you want. But the CRB response last year treated 541 palms. UH and HDOA did some treatments on Kauai as well, and some of that has continued this week by those groups as well. Breeding site treatments, we've treated and removed tens of thousands of cubic feet of infested and high-risk material on Oahu. And then HDOA has had some efforts to requiring businesses to treat material before it moves inter-island, and then they've treated the site on Big Island as well. In terms of containment, the interim rules, the one that expired and the one that's active now, restrict the movement of materials. And then, of course, the inspections that were mentioned earlier are an important tool in containment. And then, as I mentioned, we're doing primarily work at ports, and that's population suppression to try and prevent accidental transport on planes and cargo. And then we have our canine survey team, and the inspections that we do are not on all goods the way that USDA and HDOA do, but with certain businesses that are interested in us doing inspections there allow us to do those inspections. We inspect certain commodities that are likely to leave the island or be moved around Oahu. And then, of course, our outreach messaging, things like signage at garden centers and doing presentations and providing print materials for public awareness helps with to prevent spread. On the detection side, as was mentioned, the traps that are across the island, we've recently reduced our Oahu trapping. We mainly use that to determine where our problem zones are, but that's not a control. It's more just detection and delimiting. And then some other groups, the Port of Entry Monitoring Program maintains traps at most of the airports and some of the harbors. And invasive species committees, because my staff is Oahu-based, they fill in the gaps there with most of the trapping work that needs to be done, but there's significant contributions from HDOA and USDA. And then the public is also contributing too in some of those trapping efforts, and that's expected to grow. More like a citizen science approach to some of this where we don't have staff. Palm surveys and breeding site surveys happen much less frequently, but we've got the notes on those. With outreach efforts, our team handles 200 to 300 public reports per month, and a lot of that is people on Oahu, and unfortunately, we are restricted to ports, so most of those people we can't do any treatments for, but we do provide guidance for what kinds of things they can do to reduce the impact in their area. And then all the 643 pest calls for CRB on Oahu come to our group, and we do presentations to about 200 stakeholders per month statewide. And then we maintain a website and social media accounts for updated information for the public. And then, of course, the invasive species committees do a lot of public reports and presentations and social media on CRB issues as well. And then research, this is a lot in Mike's realm. I only give a brief overview of this, but looking at CRB hosts, biocontrol, pesticides, trap improvements, things like that are going on at University of Hawaii, and we assist with that in where our funding allows. And then, of course, we talk to people around the world who are dealing with CRB to find out what they're doing and what we can improve on. So that's all I have for you, and if anybody's got questions for me or Mike.
Questions on the Senate? Senator Favela?
So I know the black stuff in the trees was the monitoring, but what is the long-term solution? Because we monitored for a long time. We had people from the university, we had another group come out with a father and son team looking at them. I mean, you know, how much of the study we're gonna do till we get solutions? Because now we have no coconut tops in Oniula Beach Park. We just get stems. So now, is the department or who's going to work with the city to what? They're going to replant those coconut trees? Or how is that going to work in the communities that we're having a large vast of invasive problems that we're having with this rhinoceros pests, whatever you like call them.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's good that you brought up communities because all of the solutions require a landscape-wide approach to controlling green waste, doing treatments on host plants, and replantings. So, that's one of the difficulties with our group is getting everybody on the same page to do those kind of things. And also, our funding doesn't cover any kinds of actions in, for example, your neighborhoods that you're talking about. We don't have funding to do those kind of treatments and things. So outreach is my group's primary tool that we can employ, and we can give advice and protocols and guidance to people in those neighborhoods. But that's about, aside from the trapping data saying, hey, here's where the populations are concentrated, that's about the extent of what we're capable of doing in most neighborhoods in Oahu.
Where can we find that if you guys want to send out that data to the mayor or to whoever, so we can find out what they did with them? Because it's ugly. Everything is dying. You know what I mean? Then you're worrying about fire. These trees catch on fire. That's it. And not that we don't have our houseless community sleeping right by those trees. So I just like, no, I mean, I understand you guys took the data. It's not you guys kuleana to go out and eradicate them. But then where is this data being put? In book, in storage room, or community can go online and access them and saying, we get 200,000 in of a beach, 100,000 in Waianae. How are we going to find out and get access to that data?
Yeah, so our trapping data, we summarize and put that into reports. Some of that goes to USDA in one form, but we have a lot of information. We have maps of population across the state on our website. So crbhawaii.org has population maps that are updated monthly usually. And then if you have specific requests for data that's not on our website, let us know. And sometimes, we'll put together for like neighborhood boards, when was our first detection, or how many beetles did you catch last month? We'll put together reports on request.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Richards.
Yeah, thank you. Say your primary focus is outreach, and I'm from the Big Island, the coconut rhinoceros beetle in Waikoloa Village. Very fortunate that we had an owner recognize it, which is what we're all striving to do, get early detection and thereby control. Do you guys have enough funding to do this? And probably a bigger question for Ms. Arnott, as she's sitting over there. Rapid detection and intervention is the way we're going to control this stuff. And Chair, I'm not sure if this is a correct place to ask the question, but do we have enough funding that we can do this? Because Synesia got away from us, the fireweed, because we didn't react quickly enough. And so we're hearing the same story again and again and again. And so I'm not sure who's going to answer that question, and I'm not sure if it's the appropriate time to answer that. But question, do you have enough funding for your outreach now?
Well, we do have a robust outreach effort, and two of the staff are here today, but more is always better. So I think we're doing a good job, but there's still plenty of people that we talk to and they say, wait, what is this? What are these traps for? And so there's definitely people out there we haven't reached, but as you saw in the presentation, we're out there constantly trying to share with as many groups as we can, but more is obviously better. And previously our job was primarily Oahu, but now it's become statewide. So I think that our efforts get diluted more, we would appreciate more help.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. And I'll ask that question maybe at the end of the, so more better is better. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairs. And thank you for being here. So quickly, the CRB detected in, I believe, Kihei, Maui. How did it get there? You took care of it? What happened?
Nobody knows exactly how, sorry, Mike, did you want to take this? Yeah.
I'm happy to let you.
Nobody knows exactly how it got there. It's tough to find a smoking gun in a lot of these cases, but the closest thing we have to a smoking gun is, some bags of compost that were found on Maui had some dead CRB in them, but that wasn't near the find. But we know that materials are moving between islands with with CRB in them, and that's the only way that it would get to another island. In the specific case where it was found in that dead coconut tree, a female had to go into that tree and lay some eggs. So there's a lot of ways that it could get to the island, but probably some compost, mulch, soil, maybe even potted plants that were delivered to the Kihei area somewhere.
And sorry, quickly, so it was dead, and so it's taken care of. We don't have live stuff as far as you know.
Well, there were the live larvae that were found in the dead tree, and those were killed and removed. And then a huge amount of surveying was done by MISC, primarily with the tree surveys, but also HDOA was on the job there with doing a lot of initial surveys and trap deployments. And we had some help from USDA, and we went out there last week to do some work out there. So a lot of people involved there, but no more detections.
Okay, Chelsea?
Mahalo, and mahalo for the extra time. I really appreciate it. Again, we're going over because it is such a hot topic, and we really have a lot to discuss here. I have Christy Martin here from the coordinating group on alien pest species, and then also our Windward Oahu community members, Joe Watt and John Rapoon. Do you want a presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to get that set up, and I'll let Christy start us off. And also close us off.
Aloha. Thank you so much for going over. I think this might be a record, though, in that this is the least amount of time we've ever gone over. So aloha, chairs, committee members. It's nice to see a full room. I'm always energized at the beginning of a session. Christy Martin with the coordinating group on alien pest species. And I just wanted to cover a few things that I've heard again and again in the info briefings with the different agencies. And so my slides really are focused on that. So, I heard, why are there so many groups working on invasive species? Who are all these groups? And so I laid some of that out for you. In 92 and 94, there were some reports that were done. One of them was a report to Congress that documented that Hawaii had the worst issue in the nation. They also documented that there were gaps, and they documented what those gaps were. And some of them are, agencies have different jurisdictions. They're told to work on certain things. The Department of Agriculture really takes that name seriously. And so they're focused very much on agriculture. And so their inspections a lot of times are focused on agriculture. Things are moving in a lot of different ways, though, so that's a gap. There's outdated laws. Our laws, and I'm going to again talk about, agriculture, is that they were really made to protect sugarcane, pineapple. So a lot of those species that are prevented from coming in, all those, 30,000 plants that are on the list of species that, they're trying to regulate, a lot of them are grass species. They're bromeliad species because pineapples are bromeliad. So there's some gaps there. We had in 94 some extremely limited rapid response. Agencies can only do what they're mandated to do. And if it's not on their list, a lot of times they can't do it. If it's not on a property that they're in charge of, they can't do it there. And so these lead to the gaps. And so there are a number of groups that were created to try to fill gaps. Some in the mountains, watershed partnerships. CGAPs actually formed to help facilitate the discussions and the things that needed to be done. This was 95. I was still in school then. I got the educational materials from CGAPs. We helped lobby for the HISC. With your help, we have the HISC. Invasive Species Committee started forming on each island in 97 because they saw these gaps. And then we have the other gap filling groups, a couple of them on this list, Hawai'i Ant Lab, because Department of Agriculture, Department of Land and Natural Resources, ants are really weird creatures. And we don't have the knowledge in the agencies that are necessary to create control plans. And that's why the Hawai'i Ant Lab was formed. We didn't have the expertise within the agencies to be able to deal with coconut rhinoceros beetle. That's why the CRB team was formed. And so who does what? Department of Ag, they're civil service. They work in areas primarily where their regulations are, right? At the port, inspecting domestic imports, largely ag. Or in some cases, maybe at ranches or farms or nurseries. The ISCs, invasive species committees, they are RCOH projects. They view an entire island as a management unit, and they look to see where there are gaps. They look to see where the highest priority invasive species are and what they can possibly do. Either it's rapid response or eradication, or sometimes maybe it's bring the community up to speed to be able to control. And that's a great example, the work they're doing on the Big Island with the Albizia Assassins Project. We're teaching people how to help control little fire ants in their properties. And so that's a great example of how RCOH can bring staff to the table. Hawaii Ant Lab and CRB team, both of these are RCOH projects. They bring specialized research, management, and extension services. This is the perfect integration of the university into adaptive management. Agencies a lot of times don't have that specialized expertise that Mike has, right? As a great example. That's why RCOH exists, to support agencies to do these things. And then there's HISC and CGAPs. Well, what do we do? Well, we try to coordinate these actions. We try to make sure that we have communications between the federal, state, sometimes counties, community groups, so that we can make sure we try to cover what the gaps are. And so how's it all coordinated? Well, ultimately, we try to first check with the Department of Agriculture, both the federal and the state. Are you going to do this? Or is there a gap there? And then we try and figure out how we can fill that gap. And so really the questions that we follow, and it should be just worked into a very simple decision tree. We make decisions based on, is there capacity at Department of Ag to do it? Is there capacity at the ISCs or the Hawaii Ant Lab to do it? Where is the infestation? Is it a high priority for eradication? And how established is a particular pest? Or is it something that we're going to need the public to be able to help us control? So all of these questions come into play when we decide who's going to do what, where. Is it messy? Yes. Is it hard to explain? Yes, it took me 5 slides. But filling these gaps really requires the flexibility, communications, cooperation, collaboration, and that's what islanders do best. And so I hate to say, but I gotta go pick up my kid, and I'm gonna run away from questions. You see me frequently. I think all of you folks have my contact number, and I urge you to call me if you have questions on these. But I'm definitely gonna leave my community counterparts to share their perspectives as well. So I'm so sorry, guys.
Thank you, Christy. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what things have looked like for us. My name is Joe Watt. I'm a community development coordinator at Key Project. We're a community center in Kahalu'u here on the island of Oahu. I'm really grateful for the opportunity that the legislature has provided me through a GIA to run really epic youth programming. I take a bunch of kids, we go on Huaka'i all the time. I drag them up in the mountains with the Ko'olau Mountain Watershed Partnership. We're like pulling invasive stuff. We're rooting into Ko'olau. We're connecting with community. Everybody's having a great time. And the kids are complaining about mosquitoes. And I'm like, guys, listen, I don't know what to tell you. You guys are coming out here wearing short sleeves. You're gonna get bit by mosquitoes. If you wanna look cool, handle it. If you don't wanna look cool, you can wear long sleeves like everybody else. But they cannot handle. The reason why I bring this up is because we found little fire ants up the road from Key Project. And if the kids cannot handle mosquitoes, I don't understand how we can expect them to handle the long stings, the welts that develop after getting bitten by little fire ants. I appreciate the fact that you folks understand the value of this AINA-based programming that you chose to fund at our organization. It connects everyone with Ko'olau. It connects everyone with so much history and culture. It's such an important thing for us to do, and we cannot afford additional barriers to all of this work that we are working so hard to fund, to staff, and to put out here for our community. with a ton of help from OISC, with a ton of help from the Hawaii Ant Lab, neither of whom had an opportunity to present to you folks today. We were able to organize community groups to go out there and delimit what ended up being a 22-acre infestation. We still have a Mauka boundary of this infestation that is not yet delimited. I'm coordinating volunteers for treatments. We did door knocking in order to figure out where exactly these little fire ants are so that the community members would know that the bozos running around with backpack blowers and sprayers, it's me, we're the community center down the street. If you get questions, come talk to us. The reason why I bring all of this stuff up is because these organizations have been incredibly, incredibly helpful, and their support from the legislature and from the departments is, like, for me, boots on the ground, they're the ones that are being helpful. And we really need them to be well supported. I know that several times today, people have said something along the lines of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. And we here on Oahu, maybe we need like 3 pounds of cure, but we don't need 20 yet. So we're still at a point for little fire ants where we can do something about this with pretty decisive and drastic action. Out of all of the different invasive species that people have spoken about so far today, little fire ants, one, have an incredibly negative impact on everybody's livelihood, on the tourist industry, on farms. I know that in the Ways and Means meeting with the Department of Agriculture, there were several different stories told about farmers on Big Island and the impacts that it's had on their farming capacity due to hiring issues and how much money they have to spend on things. But here on Oahu, on Maui, on Kauai, on Molokai, little fire ants should be so easy for us to control because they only go where people are. They don't fly away, which is great because a lot of them do. The treatment is easy enough that I got trained how to do it in like 30 minutes, and now I'm doing it out in our area. And we have really great templates for what it is that we can be doing about this. Maui Invasive Species Council has done a great job treating huge areas on Maui, so we have templates for action. Like, we don't have as many questions as we do for a lot of these other issues. So hopefully, at the end of the day, I'm doing this stuff on the weekends. I'm doing this stuff in the evenings. I cannot afford to have little fire ants mess with this programming that we're running and all of these things that we've been building up for so long. And I think it's important that while we acknowledge that all of these different groups have things that they're being asked to do and that those are their priorities, we need to figure out how everybody can contribute to this work. We saw a lot of people talking about that, but I think we need a really expansive understanding of the fact that everybody's kuleana is going to be handling some of these invasive species. So I think that's it. Yeah, thank you guys.
Hello, my name is John Rapoon. I've lived on the windward side of Oahu for the better part of my life. I'm born in Molokai. My dad was a doctor over there. If we learned anything, it was that ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. You know, as I'm listening to this, I really appreciate what's gone on today. Senator Favela brought up the importance of educating communities. Our Senator Hawa from our side poked his head in the door and asked, "How are you guys doing?" What do you say after a briefing like this? We absolutely need to educate our communities and get our communities involved. All through this briefing, I've been hearing the lack of funding, the lack of staffing, the importance of workforce development to fill the kinds of staffing that's needed. This is a time for us to step up. Joe has said many times, we've been out to so many community meetings to talk story with, Lanikai, with Kaneohe and Waiahole and so on, that either we deal with this now or we're going to deal with this forever. And that's where we're at. We are at a crisis point. This has been fascinating to kind of see the roadmap laid out in front of us, who's working on what and so on, and where the gaps are. I can't help but think, I hear, with all due respect to Mufi Hanneman heading up the Hawaii Tourism Authority saying, well, we don't want to, increase the transient accommodation tax. we want to get more tourists here. How much of HTA's budget, how much of ADC's budget, how much of every state department, division, county departments, how much of their budget is being put towards dealing with invasives, without which we're not going to tackle this problem in any effective way. We have to do that. And I say that at the same time knowing that our communities are willing to step up. We're willing, we're wondering what to do with the kids for programs. Give them a stick and some peanut butter and go out and start testing. For little fire ants, that's effective. They can do that. That's safe. I also sit on a private foundation that we came riding in out of the hills, made big noise about golf course development on the windward side in a conservation area that we saw no real need for, that was going to have an impact on Kaneohe Bay and so on. As a small private foundation that can fund environmental, education, recreational interests in the Kaneohe Bay area, we've reached out to other private funders to say, what are you guys going to do? Castle Foundation, Ha'oli Mauloa, and so on, others. We also have to come together on the private side. But the state legislature has to look at the whole layout of the state and challenge the county as well, and we are doing that, to ask that question. How much of your budget can we take and put towards this? Because who's going to want to come to Hawaii if you're sitting on the beach getting stung by fire ants? That's happening in Lanikai as we speak. When we were in Lanikai, also, just real quick, I looked around the room in Lanikai and I kind of said, well, you guys all look like me, the Gandalf section. You all got gray hair, and they all kind of laughed. And I said, how many of you guys have landscapers coming and going with your property? Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? They're spreading little fire ants. We just got hammered in Waiahole, as everybody did on the island, hammered by the winds, 60-mile-an-hour winds as they come over the ko'olaus and start rolling. Guess what? Little fire ants are being spread by those winds because they're living in the trees. They're just being swept out. Even all the work that we might do can get upended by that kind of weather situation, which we're going to have more and more and more of with climate change. So there's really not much else I can add. Just a huge mahalo to all of you for the attention given to this issue, and a request that we go way deeper and work a lot harder at helping all of us in all of our different institutions and roles living in these islands to take our place, put our shoulder to the wheel. Mahalo.
Thank you, John.
One final thing, I just wanted to mahalo Senator Keohokalole, Rep. Martin, and Rep. Matayoshi, who I've gotten to know at several of these evening events. Thank you for putting those on. The last thing I wanted to say is that many of the presentations talked about port security, which is incredibly important. But if we do the port security, I think we also need to work on treating these current infestations and preventing new ones that without doing all three of those things, we're kind of lost. So mahalo to everyone working on port security. Thank you to everyone putting in effort for that. But we still have a chance with a lot of these other things. So
I
thank
got
you.
to throw in one thing, if I may, too.
Let's we're community members. We don't know how to do that.
If Amazon's coming in here, then let Amazon pay for the inspections. I mean, I think the guy who owns it is pretty wealthy. I think Bill Gates, a few others, there's a few other really wealthy people. Let's have them put their shoulder to the wheel. Mahalo.
Thank you. Any questions from the Senate?
I just got one question.
Senator.
Since you're talking about the Ghostbusters backpack, on the chemicals you use, what is the price and the cost for you guys purchasing these chemicals? The reason why I'm asking this is when we went on a WAM tour on a banana patch that was very frustrated because their employees are getting attacked by the ants, and the slow, I don't like to use the word slow, I don't like to say that too, just not coming to their aid as quickly, going forward. Reason why I bring this up is because, like you said, community-based. They said at the meeting, give us the stuff. We know it's there. We can eradicate it quickly. And I don't recall having any response in that sense. So maybe as legislators, we got to figure out how we can empower the people and make sure the chemicals that do the eradication for the fire ants and even the koki, because in Hilo, she's not here, in Hilo, I heard majority of the guys going to the old restaurants and grabbing the coffee grinds and using the coffee grinds to spread out that is non-toxic and friendly to the environment. But if we don't empower our people, like you said, is going to go away. So we as legislators got to find one way to equip the community and the public going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else from the House? Any questions?
Real briefly, I didn't hear anything about, I know Maui County created its own state Department of County Department of Agriculture. Anyone here have any interaction, know any status on that? Is there some kind of involvement and relationship?
Thank you, Representative. Yes, we meet very regularly with Maui Department of Ag, who's taking a very aggressive. I'm sorry.
please.
That's right. The world knows me. No, sorry. Dexter Kishida, Deputy at Hawaii Department of Agriculture, and we do meet, like I said, with Maui Department of Agriculture very frequently because both Director RC and Deputy Heva both are taking very aggressive action in pretty much all that we spoke about. A big portion of that is education to the public. Thank you.
Hi, Dexter. Stay right there. Thank you for the opportunity. The Health Committee was actually in a conflicting hearing during the beginning part of this, so I didn't get a chance to ask Department of Ag questions. But I did see pieces of the earlier presentation. So we discussed capacity in the WAM briefing. And my question is, I guess there was a lot of discussion about where you focus to prevent, the next thing from coming and to prevent the spread of the things that we have here. How again are you determining where you focus your attention with the limited resources you have?
Correct. Definitely challenging, because what we are doing is needing to bring our folks, and either through overtime and adjusting shifts, to bring them to do work in the rapid response world to tackle some of the LFA and CRB issues that are arising. For example, a team that just had to go to Kauai to finish some CRB work with the county there.
Right, so is there some sort of framework, like a risk assessment, that you guys use to determine where you allocate your resources? Because, I think there was a comment made earlier, and we've heard it a lot, about how the Big Island people are maybe justifiably a little annoyed that we're only talking about LFA now. And I think that's absolutely fair. So when the next thing comes in, how do you gauge whether it's so bad that you gotta just fire alarm and send everybody to it right now versus CRB, which is, I think maybe we're in a critical stage on the neighbor islands where we might have a chance, or I don't know. Where can we look as lay people to figure out whether what you guys are doing is justified by some sort of evidence?
As Administrator Okada kind of spoke about a little bit in her presentation, our team is developing this framework. There was a gap definitely in the department, and as we stepped in, we realized that there wasn't the ability. What I would love to see, for example, is a matrix to understand the health risk to people, animals, and also our INA. And so it's that kind of framework that we need to create. And one example is the severity of a little fire ant on its impact to us versus even CRB and coqui frog. And for us to be able to prioritize resources and then come to you all to also prioritize as well.
Well, so see, this is the problem I have, because what I'm told that was said earlier today at this table, and what I know has been sent to WAM earlier, is that some of the most dangerous pathways for invasive species are the import of food and animal feed and maybe consumer products, which seems like blame shifting when you were in here in October and said that you knew that there were 5 active nurseries selling infested products to consumers on Oahu. So the fact that you guys are making those determinations right now, and you're also saying that there's no matrix, I think is really problematic, especially because during all 8 years of the EGA administration, the department's position was that the greatest risk for pest incursions, and I know this because I asked it when I was in the House, the greatest risk for pest incursions was not imported food or animal feed, it was plants and plant propagative material. So to what are we justifying this change in position?
We are pulling reports through our the data system that we do collect to determine what types of
respectfully,
items.
I would like Ms. Okada to answer, because she's the one that explained it earlier.
Sure.
the thing is the risk is from all parts. We're dealing with huge amounts of what has happened past the border. But when we're talking about what is yet to come in or has come in and we don't know about it yet is the real danger. So we maybe have up to 10 years where we weren't really inspecting produce because the administration at that time felt other things.
We were also not inspecting plants that were being transported through the nursery industry, and we continue to do so.
Yes.
We have millions of sheets of toilet paper that come in every day, but how do we gauge whether we should be searching those versus live soil versus lettuce that's flying over on an airplane or Christmas trees?
And that's why we did risk assessments, but for 10 years we did not. And so we
So you have an existing matrix?
We were lucky enough to do that, but it's old data that is feeding our manifest system that we presently use to clear cargo. So I was brought in because we have to start over. So none of the present inspectors were back. It came as a result of a record of decision for Kahului Airport, where we had to do a year-long pathway of risk assessment into what was bringing in the invasive species and which ones were the worst ones coming in on what product. We're supposed to be doing that yearly, and they haven't. And we need to do that. But in the meantime, what is already here is very bad. So we have to some way be able to catch the ones that have yet to come in and be able to control what is already here. So when we have to deal with our work plans, the hardest part is, like I said, if we don't, or we're not even clearing what we're supposed to clear now, how much do I take off the line to be able to perform that risk assessment? How many can I take off the line to do the work we need to do in the nurseries and everything? Ironically, when we had to perform the Maui risk assessment back in the 2000s, we took it off, the manpower came off from the nursery certification programs. And that's what started the damage, when we don't take care of what we need to do. So instead of, we're always told, it's hard to ask for positions. That's just what it is. They say, okay, the department is 30% or whatever it is, 30% short. Plant quarantine has only 13 vacancies with several.
I understand, and I don't want to belabor the point. My concern is that there has been a consistent perception for the last 6 months out of the Department of Ag that felt like blame shifting, that felt like the outside guys are maybe more, because of the volume that comes in, maybe more of a risk than our own community. But when the department says there are 5 active nurseries that are selling infested products knowingly to consumers, and the department's position is also that we can't do anything about it because we haven't executed our own rules to take action, then how are we supposed to figure out what is going on? So if you're saying that, and I'll finish right here, if you're saying that you're developing a matrix based off of evidence that's going to properly assess risk to all vectors of invasive species, then that's a decent answer, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. On behalf of the Senate and the House, and I'd just like to say thank you very much. And I mean that from the bottom of our hearts. I think I can say that collectively, for all the work that you guys are doing. We appreciate you very, very much. And I'll end with that. John Rapun said there at the end, I think the timing is right here. Let's do this. Let's get together, and each Laulima, everybody does their part, and we can get this done. Mahalo and aloha. Have a nice weekend.